Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this year's annual conference. My name is Simon Woodward. I'm the chairman of the UK District Energy Association, and the conference this year is about maximising system efficiency and optimising network performance, which is a really key and important feature of all district heating networks. A couple of points about the event today. In the bottom of your screen, you will see some buttons which have got questions and chat. If you'd like to ask a question for one of the speakers, please do. That really helps to make the whole event work very well. Could you put that in the questions section at the bottom of the screen? And if you'd like to just talk, generally chat amongst yourselves, please do use the chat function. Afterwards, the presentations will be circulated to all who registered, and we'll also be putting a copy of the event onto our UKDEA YouTube channel. So without further ado, let me go to the next slide. Who are we? We're a non-trade, not-for-profit association. We were started over 10 years ago, back in 2010, with 6 founder members. We were started largely by a group of local authorities who wanted to create a voice and a common place where people involved in district energy in the network, district energy in the UK could network together. So we're formed primarily to offer guidance and support and to raise awareness. And the diagram on the right shows how the association works. In the centre is the scheme owners, developers, partners, so the people who are facing the pains of a district energy network on a daily basis. And those are the full members, and around the outside are those associate members, equipment suppliers, service providers, consultants, installers, etc., many of whom will be speaking this morning. We're now at circa 130 members. We're growing rapidly, and we've had 27 new members in the last year. So what do we offer to you as a member? We're a respected voice for raising concerns to government. We provide you with a 50-page monthly journal on what's happening in the world of district energy. We've got the annual conference, as per today, and the AGM. Sorry, not sure what's happening with the slides there. Seem to be going of their own volition. Oh, that's interesting. Let me just go back. Tom, can I just ask you to see what's happening with the slides, please? We're just resetting the slides. Apologies for that. Let me just... Oh, I seem to be having some technical problems, so many apologies for that for the moment. So the event today is about system efficiency and optimising network performance. We've got a good set of speakers. We're kicking off with John Saunders from BEIS, who will be giving us a BEIS heat network update. We'll then be handing over to Alex Trebowicz, who will give us an update on the heat network efficiency scheme, and then over to a number of our members. We've got 8 of our members talking about various different efficiency and optimization methodologies that they've developed, ranging from secondary network losses through to ice pigging, heat network performance, and improving efficiency of pumping systems. So in terms of us as the UKDEA, we seem to have put the slide back on the screen again. So we're working through the conference today. We've got a regular information and networking events. We've got a feature-packed website and library. We're promoting the D sector through events such as Future Build 2022, which only happened last month. We've got the training register, which has got over 40 different training courses from 20 different members, help, advice and support to our members. And we've got a network of over 130 members working together as a voice for the sector. So, Tom, would it be possible to change the next slide, please? So you might ask, why system optimization and efficiency? Well, the picture on the right is a document that was produced over 50 years ago. It was a district heating checklist and commentary. It's quite staggering that it was such a weighty tome produced 50 years ago, and we're still where we are today. But it was agreed even then that the design, installation, materials and heat networks. Materials used in heat networks were incredibly important. Disappointingly, many of the issues raised in that document still exist today, with high heat losses on secondary heat networks and poor overall network performance. Heat networks are not an emerging technology, so there's no reason for that to continue to happen. And we firmly support well-designed, efficient and high-performing heat networks. So as I said, the purpose of the day is to highlight the government's flagship scheme, which is the Heat Network Efficiency Scheme, which Alex will be talking about, and then allow our members to talk about ways they believe efficiency and performance of new and existing networks can be improved. Okay, next slide, please, Tom. So just a bit about future events, and apologies to those who've joined. Looks a bit odd in terms of the presentation. We were just having a few technical issues with showing my presentation. So all delegates were finalising our next event, which is talking about the very hot topic of fourth generation versus ambient fluid, some people call fifth generation heat networks. We've already got 5 speakers for that event. If you as a member or a potential member would like to get involved and talk about that, please do get in touch. So next slide, please, Tom. So I just thought, we're not a political organisation, but I think it's sometimes important to pay respect to those people. 30 years ago this year, I was actually in Ukraine myself. We were on a district heating collaboration visit with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and there's just a couple of pictures there. The one in the middle is actually a picture of myself. I'm the chap on the left-hand side. Over 30 years ago, the one on the left is a picture of some very large transmission mains they're installing. The one on the right is the type of technology they were using over 30 years ago, which was actually pipe in duct systems. I'm conscious it's changed a lot since then, but the chaps in the middle, district heating engineers, will still be there in Ukraine today, and I think it's important to remember those people. Next slide, please, Tom. So that's me. If you want to discuss membership of the UKDEA, there are my details. Again, apologies for the technical difficulties of showing the presentation in the full format it should be. And I will now ask John Saunders to come on the stage and to make a presentation about BEI's heat network update. Thanks very much.
Hello, and thanks, Simon, for the intro. Yes. Sorry, I'm also having some technical difficulties with my camera and audio. So this is going well, isn't it? Let's try again. Hello, I'm John Saunders, Project Director for Heat Networks, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And I'm really going to be setting the context for heat networks in the UK and why the topic of today's event is so important. Firstly, just echoing Simon's words, our thoughts are with all the Ukrainians that are currently affected by the conflict, as well as other nationalities that are within the country. And I know a good deal of Russians scattered around the world who are shocked and dismayed by the actions currently affecting their country. And of course, this has real life implications for us, even much further away from the conflict, as we see gas prices continuing to increase and energy security coming into full focus yet again, and the need to really think through what our long-term relationship with foreign gas and gas more generally looks like in the move to decarbonise the UK. And of course, this is set in the context really of our pressing need to address urgently climate change right the way around the world. And many of you will be familiar that there's now consensus that we need to limit the increasing temperatures to below 1.5 degrees in order to avoid the worst impacts of climate change being felt. And your government's way of doing that is to write into legislation our commitment to net zero by 2050. Now that's obviously a a long time away, but also no time at all. And whilst we've made good progress on addressing electricity, and we've seen a big step change, mainly caused by the faster build out and greater capacity of offshore wind. We see some inroads being made into transport through the increased uptake of EVs. Heat and heat in buildings is really going to be the next big transformation that we need to make some serious inroads in if we're going to meet our net zero ambitions. And why is decarbonisation of heat important? Well, it's responsible for almost half of primary energy use and over a third of carbon emissions. And so any failure not to address it means that we've got no hope of meeting our end targets and curbing that increase in climate. Now, there's a few different ways that we can get there. And we talk about 3 technology pathways primarily. We talk about the mass electrification of heating in buildings. So whether that's direct electric, heat pumps, we can use low carbon gases. So we're already using a proportion of biomethane into the grid, but increasingly looking to prove the case for hydrogen being used either in certain geographies or nationally in order to decarbonise heating in homes, either coupled to, of course, green production or some kind of CCUS if we're using, again, fossil fuels. And the third pathway, and the one obviously that's really the focus of today's event, are heat networks, which, although we talk about them as the third technology, actually we see them as the kind of foundation for either electrification or a low carbon gas pathway, given that they can operate under either of those future environments. So that's definitely one of the reasons that we support them. And part of the strategic rationale is they can move depending on which pathway emerges the preferable one in the future. But there's also some other reasons. One of the main ones is they can access the large-scale, low-carbon sources of heat that you just can't do at a building level scale. So whether that's connection to large energy from waste plants, waste heat from industry, geothermal, shallow or deep, waste heat, heat from rivers, the list kind of goes on. And that's one of the things that's so exciting for us about heat networks. And all those sources of heat really have a benefit on the wider energy system. And the primary one for us is, what's the most cost-effective way for UK PLC to meet its net zero obligations? Actually, under the sort of electrification pathway, you're going to be looking at the need to seriously upgrade the power grid in order to meet the needs of electrified heating and electrified transport. One of the exciting things about heat networks is going to be the way that it can reduce that overall investment requirement through better performance of the heat pumps, through reducing peak demand on the network, through load shifting and being smart with when we're running plant, broadly just operating in a more smart and dynamic way with the energy system. And that's going to create big savings for UK PLC. And of course, we also think that they're a brilliant investment opportunity into the UK. And, I think many people have recognised that we are a pretty built up area in comparison to some other European markets with a relatively low proliferation of heat networks currently. And so there's a huge investment opportunity there. So what does that kind of look like? Well, we're talking about around 3% of heat currently being provided by heat networks. And the Committee on Climate Change talks about around 18% of heat being delivered cost effectively through heat networks in a net zero world. So that'd be an increase of something like 15 to 90 terawatt hours of heat. You could be talking about an increase from around 500,000 to over 5 million customers, and an increase in annual investment of currently something shy of 500 million to well over £1 billion a year invested as part of an overall investment picture of between 60 and 80 billion. So there's huge scope for this in the market, but currently it's still pretty slow in terms of building growth, and so we've been supporting the sector for several years now, and I just wanted to spend a few moments talking through our latest support, the Heat Networks Transformation Programme. So first off, there are kind of future regulatory levers to try and help the market grow. So the first is bringing in our consumer protections, our additional statutory rights and powers, so that heat networks and those that would be building electricity or gas networks have similar rights to install the equipment. And finally, enshrining decarbonisation in legislation, so that we know that heat networks are going to deliver us that impact on net zero that we need. The second thing is the implementation of our heat network zoning policy. And so this is a policy from 2025 onwards, where broadly we look to provide confidence and certainty to buildings, to local government, to industry and to central government around the role of heat networks in different locales right the way across the country, where we'll be implementing zones in partnership with local authorities and mandating certain building typologies to connect. So in doing so, hopefully there's more certainty around those places where heat networks are the most cost-effective way to decarbonise heating, and it creates certainty for those developers of those projects that ultimately they're going to build out and connect to the fullest extent that they can, rather than the least risky version of it. And then we have a series of capital schemes. So we've been delivering our Heat Networks investment project for the last 3 or 4 years now. That was our £320 million flagship scheme, and it's been supporting a range of projects right the way across the country. We've just closed our final funding round, which was oversubscribed, and it's been a really exciting transition from high carbon to low carbon, even within the lifetime of that scheme, a transition from smaller schemes to larger schemes, from public sector to private sector invested, and a whole host of other transitions just in a very short time. And that's really made the case for us to launch our new Green Heat Network Fund, which is our £288 million capital investment scheme, which is launched last week. I'm losing track of my weeks already, and that's now open for applications. What that'll do is provide grant funding for a range of different project sponsors to apply for low carbon technologies. So it might be those connections to energy from waste plants. It might be those the construction of new large scale heat pumps and a range of different technologies. It'll be open for existing networks, as long as there's additional capacity being added, as well as new networks. And we're really excited to accelerate that transition that we talked about and really create that step change in the market in the first half of the decade as we move into the sort of regulatory space. And the final capital scheme, which we're going to hear more on from Alex after me, is our heat network efficiency scheme. And this has been some time in the making, and Alex will talk through how we've sort of got to where we've got to today. But we're really excited about the launch of both the demo scheme last year and the main scheme next year. And the main reason for that is that although the majority of heat network customers get a good deal and a good experience, actually all of our surveys suggest that there's a large minority. I think in the last consumer survey it was somewhere around 25% that didn't get such a good experience. And whether that's issues with service standards, issues with performance, some of which Simon alighted upon, transparency of pricing and billing, all issues that we need to resolve in order to see this growing and accelerating market that we need. And so I think HNES is going to be incredibly important in delivering those benefits to consumers, whether that's comfort or lower bills or improved carbon savings. I think there's going to be some benefits to industry because you'll know that the stuff that you're installing is going to perform the way you think it's going to perform. I think for us, there's double benefit. I think there's benefit to regulation because at some point we're going to have to start looking at those networks that are worst performing, and frankly, the fewer that we've got to investigate, the more cost effective our regulation is going to be to enforce. And a big one for me is we want to throw our full weight of support behind heat networks, and that's much easier to do if everyone's getting a good deal and getting a good experience. It's much harder to do if people are experiencing poor quality service. And so I think just to close out, at a time where both cost and geopolitical implications are being felt, I think the need for efficiency, resource efficiency, commodity efficiency, has really never been so important. So I think hearing the range of presentations today around how we can make these networks more efficient will be a fantastic learning experience for everyone involved. And hopefully we can all go away having learned something, and we can actually put it into practice in the networks that we're going to see built and improved right the way across the country. And that was it from me. Simon, I'm not sure if I'm handing back to you or to Alex.
Yep, no, thanks very much. Handing back to myself, John. So thanks very much indeed for speaking. That was a good introduction on where you are with BEIS. So we'll allow you to leave the stage, and we'll ask Alex to come onto the stage now to make his presentation about the heat network efficiency scheme. And I think we seem to be having the same technical problems we had previously, Tom. There's clearly some glitch in the software that's appeared this morning, which is slightly annoying. Sorry about this, Alex.
That's okay. If it's fine to just put it on the PDF if that helps, and I can just ask Tom to move the slide on. If that's a short-term solution.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let me see. Tom, are you okay to share via PDF if we're having problems doing it? Oh, I think we're up, Alex. I'll stay on the screen for a second until you've got a bit into your presentation. So
yeah, that looks. I just moved it. That looks fine. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Simon.
Okay. Thanks, Alex.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name's Alex Trebowicz, and I work in the Heat Networks team at the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And today I'm going to be talking about the Heat Network Efficiency Scheme, which is, as John's trailed, is a programme that's supporting existing heat networks to improve performance. I'm just going to give an overview of the Heat Network Efficiency Scheme demonstrator, or demo as I'll refer to it, which we've been running over the last sort of 7 months or so. I'll provide a bit of data from some of the projects we've been funding in the demonstrator, and I'll give a sort of a brief look ahead to further funding, so our HNES main scheme. And just before I do that, just to sort of say that it's likely that a lot of the stuff that I talk through in the demonstrator is likely to be sort of similar to what we're looking to deliver in the main scheme, with a few tweaks subject to scheme design. So in terms of how we've got to where we are now, so really the kind of trigger, if you like, for a lot of the work we've been doing with supporting existing heat networks over the past few years was the CMA report on heat networks, which, as John mentioned, identified a kind of minority of networks and customers that weren't experiencing service that we would like. We ran a kind of a proof of concept project, if you like, called the Heat Network Optimization Opportunities, which worked with 21 existing operational heat networks to identify issues with those projects, identify what solutions could be used, what measures or packages of measures could be developed to address those issues, and how much those solutions cost and how cost effective they were. So that was a piece of work that kind of delivered some kind of reports that were played back to those network operators, and that project sort of stopped there. We took some of the learning from that and sort of considered, well, actually, could we take the next stage of work one step further and actually offer support, financial support for projects to actually deliver those works that have been identified. And through that, we developed the HNS demonstrator, which ran from October last year until March. And my presentation will mainly sort of cover this phase of the scheme development here. So we're currently in delivery of that, and then the learning and the evaluation of that scheme is currently feeding into development of the heat network efficiency scheme main, which is going to be a multi-year 30 million capital scheme. So in terms of what we're actually trying to achieve through this scheme, so we are deploying funding into projects to improve the performance and address various things in those projects. And the blue boxes here kind of outline the objectives of the efficiency scheme. So firstly, core objective around network efficiency. So that manifests through delivering fuel savings and subsequent carbon emission savings. We've got another core objective on improving customer outcomes. So we look to achieve that through reducing cost of heat delivered or heat tariffs, through reducing service interruptions, improving information provision or accuracy of metering and billing for customers. And then a couple of perhaps more secondary objectives. So the third one is increasing the visibility of performance data in heat networks, which we think is quite poor generally. And the fourth one is supporting and feeding into other heat network policy areas. So primarily that's supporting the transition to sector regulation, but also feeding into development of technical standards for existing heat networks, and also contributing to the Green Heat Network Fund pipeline for existing projects, which I'll cover in a bit more detail a bit later. In terms of what we have funded or what the kind of guidance related to, so the funding for the demonstrator was split into two. So a budget for revenue grants, so that's essentially delivering optimization studies. So this kind of covers projects where the owner or the operator might realize that there are issues with the network, but they're not sure exactly why they occur or how to fix them. So these grants were essentially allowing operators to procure third-party support to analyze their networks, do some diagnostics, and then provide a recommendations report to say, these are the issues, this is how you fix them, and this is how much those issues cost, and those solutions, cost, and what they can possibly deliver in terms of benefits. And we originally had a budget of £375,000 for that work, and we uplifted that to about 1.5 million. So that portion of the funding was heavily oversubscribed. We had a second part, which was our capital grant. So that was actually delivering the measures that were identified or were needed for those networks, and that covered pretty much the whole of the district heating or communal network system architecture. So energy centre and plant room, primary network, secondary network, and tertiary network. The key exclusion here was funding for the technology switch. So perhaps moving from a gas boiler to a heat pump. That sits firmly in the Green Heat Network Fund space. And again, I'll pick up on that a little bit later. In terms of an overview of kind of eligibility and scheme design, so In terms of eligibility and types of applicants for the demonstrator, that was fairly broad, covering any existing district or communal heating system. And the applications we received were mainly from local authorities, housing associations, and private sector applicants. We awarded funding under Section 31, which was for local authorities, so providing funding essentially ahead of need, and under Section 98 for all other, providing funding as a reimbursement after work's been completed. For our optimisation study, our revenue grants, we suggested a budget of between £20,000 and £24,000 per study per project, obviously with some flex in that for much smaller or much larger projects. And we were able to fund up to 100% of eligible costs for that, and we provided an outline scope of work that we expected projects to deliver against. And for the capital grants, we funded up to, but not including, 50% of eligible costs. So projects had to bring match funding to the works they were delivering. And then we also had, aside from the match funding, some subsidy control requirements and also monitoring reporting requirements for projects for 12 months after their package of works had been completed. Just very quickly on timescales of the demonstrator. So the project was delivered at pace, and we had a lot of feedback from the market on that. And we appreciate it was very challenging for many projects to either kind of apply and deliver in the timescales that we were working to, or to deliver the kind of full package of works that they may have wanted to. So we're expecting projects maybe that delivered a smaller scope of work and might come back to us to deliver the rest later. We're kind of currently approaching the end of the grant drawdown period, which is the end of this month, but that's for the grant portion of the funded works only. So some projects will have completed all of their work, the grant funded and match funded portion, by the end of the month, and some will continue the latter into April, in some cases a bit longer. And as I mentioned before, we see the efficiency scheme as a complementary programme to the Green Heat Network Fund. So we know that the Green Heat Network Fund has some requirements around performance for funding existing heat networks. So it feels like that pathway is there for projects to use the efficiency scheme funding to deliver targeted improvements and demonstrate that they've achieved that level of efficiency or performance that's required for Green Heat Network Fund funding. So we're working closely with colleagues across the team to ensure that our kind of what's coming out of our efficiency scheme pipeline is kind of visible to the Green Heat Network Fund team. So that's kind of the end of the overview of the sort of scheme design and what we've been doing. The next few slides are going to be some kind of highlights of application data. So in terms of the applicant types that we had in the demonstrator, so I think the first thing to say is we received a lot more applications than we were expecting. So the scheme was oversubscribed, even given the kind of challenging timescales that we asked projects to work to, which actually is quite a positive in terms for us in terms of demonstrating the demand for this type of work, and stands us in good stead going forward, I think. Our capital projects were kind of mainly private sector applicants, possibly indicating kind of better readiness for delivery compared to local authorities or housing associations, or perhaps just the pace at which decisions can be made in those organisations. And a lot of our revenue funded projects were local authorities and housing associations. So again, fairly small sample size in the grand scheme of things, but perhaps reflecting the need for that kind of upfront support more in those types of organisations. In terms of the geographical split of projects, so there was a very strong London focus. I think over 2/3 of our applications were kind of London based, which in one sense reflects kind of nucleus of heat network development, certainly in recent years, but it's quite high even compared to, for example, our OPSS data sets. So yeah. And the scheme was actually open to Welsh networks as well, but we didn't receive any applications from Wales. So we're working with Welsh government colleagues to understand the reason for that and whether that's something we want to address kind of going forward. So this slide just indicates a count. This is just for capital applications that we received. So it's just a count of all the kind of issues that were flagged by applying networks at application stage. So I think the only kind of standout, or the main standout point here for me is there aren't any kind of key issues that are being kind of experienced by projects. There's a fairly kind of broad range of things that networks need to address. Certainly heat tariffs, kind of consumption of fossil fuels or reduction of that, and kind of pumping energy consumption can stand out from a lot of projects. In terms of some of the benefits that applicants were targeting for delivery, so again, this is application stage, so these are kind of aspirational or targeted benefits. The first four that you have here, so emissions, energy consumption and distribution losses, relate kind of to our first objective around addressing network efficiency, and the other five relate to our second primary objective of addressing customer detriment. So again, high focus on emissions reduction and fossil fuel consumption reduction. And then in terms of this slide, so this kind of gives an overview of coming back to my previous slide on kind of what we were funding and where in the network those measures were being delivered. So this again is just a count of the kind of funded activities across our capital projects, split by plant room, primary network, secondary network, and tertiary network. So obviously a strong kind of focus on plant room activities, potentially, given that those are less invasive or potentially less interruptions experienced compared to other things towards the kind of residential or kind of end customer end, and also a strong focus on the secondary side. And for our scheme, that included a few projects that were looking at replacing or kind of overhauling or replacing parts in heat interface units as well. And I think across all of these projects, there was also a strong focus on metering. So noting that metering required under the metering and billing regs wasn't eligible. I think most projects were looking at adding some metering to enable them to either kind of, going forward, understand and operate their systems a little bit better, or just have much clearer visibility of the kind of performance of their systems. So then, again, just kind of following up with a brief forward look. So as I mentioned before, our heat network efficiency main scheme has £30 million of capital funding. We will be funding some revenue work as well, those optimization studies, but those budgets are still to be confirmed. We're working towards scheme launch in April 23, spring 23. So we're going through our scheme design and approvals process now, and also speaking to the projects that we funded in the demonstrator and taking as many lessons as we can from that. Just finally, we have a mailbox. So if anyone's interested in registering with us to receive updates on progress and a kind of first look at any information that we're developing or sharing with the market over the next sort of 3, 6, 9, 12 months, then please just drop us an email to hnes@bays.gov.uk, and we'll make sure that we include you on our mailouts. And that was the end of my slides. So thanks, Simon.
Lovely. Thanks very much indeed, Alex. That was really very interesting, and thank you for presenting on the heat network efficiency scheme. Tom, if I can ask you to drop the slides, and John, would you mind coming back on stage? That'd be really helpful. So we've got a question in the chat already, Alex. So will the findings, outcomes of the heat network efficiency scheme be made available to help wider industry learning? So are you planning to publish a document reporting on what's happened, Alex?
We will definitely be looking to disseminate some of the learnings from this, whether that's in a document or through kind of stakeholder engagement events. We don't know yet. We're just sort of in the process of evaluating and engaging with kind of projects to see, what's been delivered, what benefits are starting to accrue. I think, one of the advantages of working with existing schemes is, that you might be able to actually see the benefits accrue in real time as the schemes are already there and operating. And I think we do have plans to bring forward some sort of written guidance based on the kind of previous project that I mentioned, the heat network optimization opportunities. So that's certainly our intention. So yeah, please watch this space.
Okay, yeah, that would be very helpful. And another question from Richard Hanson-Graville. Can the scheme be driven by consumer groups rather than operators? So could you, I'm not sure how the application would work, but if customers are fed up with their scheme and they think it's being run inefficiently, is there a mechanism for them to seek some recourse, seek some funding, and even if it's for an optimization study, to allow their network to be assessed to find out why it's inefficient? Alex, seems a reasonable question.
That's a really good question. We can definitely take that away and think about it. I mean, we're already engaged with people like Heat Trust and other kind of consumer groups that I'm sure will be asking us similar questions. I think possibly, as I think Richard's kind of implied, the demonstrator didn't really have that kind of that kind of customer representation, if you like, in terms of the applications that were coming through. So yeah, we can definitely take that one away and see.
We've definitely had to start grappling with this on the regulation side and the kind of consumer experience and thinking about what the process is for consumers to say, actually, I think that I'm getting a bad deal, whether that's in terms of service standards or cost or whatever. So I think actually thinking through a very similar process and then thinking about the kind of cross referral mechanisms between areas is going to be really important. So as Alex said, I think that's a really good one to take away.
Good. No, absolutely. Okay. Delegates, please do ask questions. There's an awful lot of people in the room, so please don't be shy. In advance, there's some more questions coming forward. Alex, I'll use the opportunity just to flush out hopefully a few bits that maybe you can tell us. You said that there was 375,000, which went up to 1.5 million for the revenue in the pilot study, and there was 3.8 originally. Did that fund go up for capital fund in the pilot phase in the end? Was it more?
It went up. It went up slightly, not as markedly. I think we ended up with about 4.1 million. It's actually kind of come down again. I think to 3.8. So by luck or by judgment, we ended up roughly where we thought we'd be in terms of that funding.
Okay, and I'll jump between questions from delegates and questions from me. So a question from delegates from Paul. So do you consider water as the principal heat transfer medium, or are there other fluids out there? I'm not sure. You might have to answer that one, Alex. It's an intriguing question. I think most networks are using water, but I'll leave you to respond, Alex.
Well, I mean, I suppose what we're more interested in is the kind of definition of heat network or communal heating scheme. So if that has a different heat transfer mechanism, as long as it falls within the heat network definition in the context of our scheme, it should be eligible. So it's not something we're really kind of majoring on in terms of scheme design.
Okay, and I think you mentioned, but potentially quite quietly a number of times, the main scheme, will that be 30 million, did you say?
30 million capital, yeah.
30 million capital. And do you know how much revenue?
We don't know that yet.
So revenue question mark. Just to give an idea for delegates when they're sort of developing their business plans and thoughts, is there a minimum or maximum application you can make for capital?
So in the demonstrator, we we didn't have a minimum or a maximum. We thought that the maximum would be constrained just by the time that projects would need to deliver a particular scope of work. And we did have some pretty low value applications in the capital. I think that is one area that we may be looking to sort of consider our approach. In terms of sort of setting a kind of minimum value, but I don't think we've reached a view on that yet.
Okay, and just to sort of flesh that out before we go back to questions from the delegates, do you know the number of dwellings in terms of the capital support, the number of dwellings that were supported?
I don't off the top of my head, but we did ask for various kind of things on the in the application form just to get a kind of flavour of the project. So we do have a kind of a profile of each project that we could pull out. Yeah,
I think what I'm trying to get at is giving people at this event an idea of how far you think projects could go in sort of scale, size, what you addressed in the pilot scheme, what you think could potentially be addressed in the main scheme. Are you talking about addressing the efficiency of 10,000 dwellings, 50,000 dwellings, 100,000 dwellings, and whether you've given thought to those kind of metrics?
So obviously we've kind of we know roughly how many projects we've funded for how much. We've kind of taken a very initial stab at what that might mean in terms of just kind of amplifying that from 3.8 million up to 30. So we're kind of looking at across a couple of years, maybe funding a couple of hundred in the hundreds of projects. There's going to be quite a significant variation in there from small commonly heated schemes to sort of larger, in some cases city scale or kind of campus scale networks. Possibly we're expecting that, given that the main will have much longer delivery times, that the values of those projects might go up. So it's kind of difficult to scale up from the demo to the main scheme quite so easily. But I mean we're planning to engage with projects in the run up to the main scheme. So hopefully that will kind of feed our kind of expectations as to what might come through.
And of course, Alex, I was just going to say, Alex mentioned that we've got the email. So if you have a scheme and you want to test size, scale, complexity, eligibility, then the team's very happy to receive those. And these schemes work best when we hit the ground running with a pipeline of projects. So please do get in touch with the team.
Okay, no, brilliant. Just go back to another question from Paul in the chat. I'm not sure I've ever heard of that before, but Alex, I don't know whether you have. Maybe we could think about answering that after the event. But I'll ask the question: research to improve the performance of water. I'm thinking about the Tom's effect.
Say that again, Simon. Sorry, I didn't catch it. Research
in the chat from Paul, it's saying, has any research been carried out to improve the performance of water? I'm thinking about the Tom's effect. Not something I've ever come across myself, but I'll leave you to consider that and hopefully respond post the event. It could be an interesting avenue, Alex. So I'll leave you to consider. I can see lots of people will be thinking about Googling what the Tom's effect is now. In terms of the main scheme, Alex, just carry on in the sort of a Q&A on the main thing. How many years do you think that will be open for?
So that will be across financial year 23-24 and 24-25 as it stands currently.
24. I was just a bit, a couple of final questions as well. I'm hoping that others will post them in the chat, but if not, I'll take the opportunity to ask them. I was a bit concerned you're adding in tertiary networks, because you can spend an awful lot of money in tertiary networks that multiplies up and that possibly diminishes what the returns might be. Are you planning to keep tertiary networks in, and do you regard tertiary networks as everything downstream in the HIU? So you're talking about reconfiguring radiators in properties or adding in, controls on radiators, etc.? I'm just interested to understand.
Yeah, so I think in the main, what we've seen in the demo is it's kind of controls and kind of system balancing, system flushing, stuff like that. So yeah, I would expect that unless projects can tell us otherwise, I'd expect that would stay in for the main.
Okay, and final question for you about this before we move on to some for John. It's called the Heat Network Efficiency Scheme, but I was intrigued to see in the pie charts that a number of them, the intervention measures, were about accuracy of data, but also about reliability of service. Do you see, even if they're not improving efficiency, applicants could make you could make an application to improve the reliability of a heat network?
Well, I think we've got that's a really good question. So I think the reason we've kind of split our two objectives for the scheme is one, which is the kind of perhaps the more kind of engineering kind of controls, widgets kind of side, and then hopefully delivering that leads into kind of other benefits. So I think the way we've assessed projects has been looking at both, and we would hope that sort of one would lead to the other. I think possibly we're trying to fund projects that kind of have kind of both issues that they're trying to address, because the benefits then become quite broad. And we didn't actually receive any applications like that from memory that just targeted that very particular part. But I think if it's planning to address customer detriment, then we should at least consider it at application and kind of process it on par with the other applications.
Okay, I'm thinking particularly about maybe a lot of the statistics I've seen, a lot of the failures in heat networks are due to the lack of redundancy in systems in energy centres, pressurisation units, etc. And I just wondered whether improving the system redundancy in schemes is something you'd be prepared to fund, even though it doesn't implicitly add an improvement into the efficiency of the heat network. It does improve the uptime of the network and hence the customer experience.
Yeah, again, I think that's one to take away. It's a really interesting point. We'll take that one away and think about whether with the projects that do come in just to address that, how that might sort of score and be assessed as part of our process. So yeah, thanks for raising that.
Okay, a question from Alexander Fanklin. He's put it in the chat, so I've just found it. Energy from waste interact with efficiency metrics that you use. I think what he's meaning is, could you make some adjustments to the primary energy from waste plant to in some way improve the overall efficiency of the system?
That's a very good question.
Well, while you're thinking, I'd like to thank all the delegates for good questions and clearly posing Alex some thoughts. So I don't know, is that one you feel you can answer or one you want to take away, Alex?
I think I think we'd need to. I think in the demo, the way we kind of structured kind of applicant was someone who had an ability to influence and approve investment decisions in that network. Right. So possibly if that EFW plant sits outside of the envelope of what do I have influence over in the network, then possibly it would sit outside that. So for example, I don't think a network owner would necessarily be able to compel the EFW site to change its operating parameters for efficiency, unless there's some kind of commercial arrangement going on. But I will take that one away and give it a bit more thought. It's a good question.
Okay. And Paul's come back with a bit of a clarification. Presumably improvements in heat exchange are open for the heat network efficiency scheme. So if you've managed to, if the system that's been installed has got a poor level of heat exchange between a primary, secondary, tertiary, whichever, you'd be able to fund improvements in the heat exchange system.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done that for kind of dwelling level heat exchangers in the demo.
Okay, and Carol's just asked a question. I think it's more to the audience, but I think it's an interesting question that could apply. It's about how you're analysing the efficiency improvements, and I suppose the rigour that's been applied to those. He's mentioning they've got a particular piece of software for simulating different efficiency improvements and optimisation. What level of rigour are you expecting applicants to show when they're calculating the potential efficiency improvements, and what happens if those are not delivered?
It's a very good question. So we have, as I think I mentioned in my slides, so we have monitoring and reporting requirements for the projects. At application, the projects had to kind of report a baseline of performance based on, ideally kind of metered or measured data. They had kind of targets that they stated at application in terms of what they want to deliver, or what the funding will deliver in terms of improvements, and we're just monitoring those currently. So there's a 12-month monitoring reporting period after all the works have been complete. So in simple terms, it's baseline, target, and then we're going to see what happens in between and report on that.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much. So a couple of final closing points for myself. One is Alexander Frank helpfully put the Wikipedia link to the Tom's effect in the chat, if anybody was interested. And John, just a question for you. Clearly, this conference is very much focused on efficiency and optimization of heat networks, but one of the big impacts on customers and customer costs is the current gas crisis. And I just wondered whether you wanted to say a few words about the work that BEIS are doing or contemplating, or the work streams you're following in terms of the impact on customers, because that's an order of magnitude much greater than improving efficiency in heat networks. Can I ask you to say a few words?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there is a link because we've got losses in systems that are exacerbating the impact on consumers. So, clearly, the more efficient the systems are, the lower the impact. But more broadly, we've got around 500,000 heat network and communal heating customers, many of which are sitting outside of the price cap that, as individuals, we're all protected by on our individual gas and electric bills. And many of us will be contemplating what a big increase in the price cap means to us personally from the 1st of April. So what that's meant is that there's a proportion of heat network customers that are seeing very large increases in their bills, either above the price cap, or even if it's equal to or below the price cap, in real terms, they're still very large increases to what they're used to paying. And clearly, we need to consider a range of options to address this. There are some things already happening. So, as part of the overarching government support package, there's the energy rebate that's being put onto electricity bills, which heat network customers will be eligible for, unless in the few instances where they're part of a private wire network. And of course, the council tax rebate, which anyone in property bands A through D will be receiving in the new year. But that's, I think that's going to have an impact, but not anywhere near enough of an impact. So long term, we've announced that we're going to be appointing Ofgem as our regulator, and they'll be given powers to look at pricing and consider how to essentially drive consistent outcomes between those residential customers on heat networks and communal heating systems and those within building solutions. And we're continuing to look at a number of ways that we can kind of take the edge off the price increases in the short term. So looking at whether there's more that could be done for the Landlord and Tenant Act, which would enable some network operators to purchase gas further in advance and potentially find better deals, and any way that we can try and help some of these smaller networks kind of bundle together and go and procure energy more cost effectively, even if it's going to be much more expensive than they would historically have experienced. And of course, continue to work with trade and membership organisations to really think through what the pain looks like being felt by the consumer, what we can do there, but also increasingly what's being felt by the industry itself as they try and balance out the high wholesale gas prices and the pass-through costs to residents, and that's really a much more emerging picture.
Okay, brilliant. No, thanks very much indeed, John, and apologies to delegates because we're running slightly behind schedule now, but I thought it was important on such a key issue to allow John to explain what BEIS are doing. So without further ado, I will thank Alex and John for both their presentations and to sitting there calmly while they listen to all my questions. So thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for the opportunity. Cheers, Simon.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Alex. I'll ask them both to leave the stage, and I'll ask Richard Hanson-Graville to join the stage, and he'll be now making a presentation on optimising hydraulic performance of heat networks and energy centres. So over to you, Richard. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, my name is Richard Hanson-Graville. I'm the Head of Research and Development for Thermal Integration, and just going to quickly run through some innovative approaches to optimising heat networks. Just a very little bit to fill you on who we are if you don't know. We're manufacturers of equipment, specialise in hot water, thermal storage, coil and plate heat exchange systems, and thermal system integration. So that's connecting any heat source through to any heat load. I've got a factory in Sudbury in Suffolk where we manufacture the products, where we've also got the UK's largest renewables training facility, which we run with our parent company SpecFlu. We support products from the initial concept design all the way through to the end of life cycle. So we're still supporting systems 34 years old. We've been around a while and involved in some quite key technologies over the years, going back to the original pre-plumbing packs, the first thermal stores with plate heat exchangers on, renewable multi-fuel systems. I suppose more recently we've been known for our BESA results on our HIU, which have been the best in the industry for 5 years solid now. We're very heavily involved in heat networks these days. Our expertise, we would say we've been around a while. We've contributed, I think, to every bit of guidance that currently applies, going all the way back to the Plumbing Engineering Services Design Guide, the Plumber's Bible. So we were authors of that, as well as the recent CP1 and Heat Networks Design Guide and the erratums to CIBSE Guide B. So we tend to live in the quite academic end of it all. Right, jumping into heat networks. Okay, to put it bluntly, heat networks in general, they're not really fit for purpose, certainly the historical ones. There are some fundamental reasons for this. Guidance on pipe sizing has found to be wrong, typographic errors. It's only recently been updated through an erratum to CIBSE Guide B to reinstate sizing by velocity. So, if you followed the book, you couldn't get it right historically. Very few consultants understand the physics. They blindly follow inaccurate guidance, and we're finding that still a lot of them are completely unaware of the recent changes and corrections, and are still pushing the old designs. We also find networks are rarely checked before handover. They typically have such a lack of visibility, it's impossible to see problems. It almost feels deliberate. We can't understand how these networks get handed over in the state they're in. Okay, a few more problems, a little bit more specific. Historically, systems have been based on constant flow principles rather than variable flow principles. Today, it's all about low return temperatures to make heat sources more efficient, because in the old days, it was about keeping the heat piping around the system to keep temperatures up. As a result of that, things like low loss headers, which are pretty criminal, are commonplace. Pressure bypasses are still fitted where they should be thermostatic. I mean, this is stated in guidance for years, but we're still seeing optimization scheme results where they're saying that people should be fitting pressure bypasses. So there's some real big problems about that stuff. Pumps and pipes are so oversized as to make correct operation impossible. Very few systems follow the agreed hydraulic layouts in CP1. So and basically they're incompatible with condensing boilers and heat pump technology. They're not going to get these heat sources running efficiently until the hydraulic layouts of the plant rooms matches where it should be done. Buffer stores, they're rarely used. I mean, they are used, but they're rarely used properly. They're absolutely critical to meeting the lowest and highest demands. Most of the problems we see on networks, to be honest, are things that are to do with low load problems with massive boilers, and there's a lack of a buffer store, and you simply can't connect, a 10 kilowatt load to a megawatt boiler. Okay, BESA and HIU. So we've been getting on the case, I suppose, 6 years ago since BESA came out, and we actually started to get some data. It's not from networks, but it was from the HIUs through the BESA test. So the understanding of HIUs and the correct operation has come along leaps and bounds since the BESA regime went into play. With now everyone pretty much understands the thermal operation of HIUs. We've got graphs, reports, and a very heavy amount of competition going on between manufacturers. But there's still problems. BESA still does not address pressure-related functions. It misses a lot of the problems with HIUs. So a lot of things we see in the field are stuff like HIUs letting by. These things are not caught in BESA. And other important functions such as return limits. These are more efficiency functions, compensation functions, weather compensation, these kind of things. They were in the original BESA very first tests, but they were dropped because really the steering group doesn't have the technical knowledge and there's industry resistance. So when you've only got a few people in the industry know what they're doing, everyone likes to keep that sort of stuff quiet. But it's getting there. It is slowly getting there through the groups. Recent optimization survey. So we've been involved in network optimization projects for a number of years. Going back to the Fair Heat SRBI project, we did the optimization on that. We're doing 11 of the current H&S schemes, and we've done many others. We're often called in to fault find out what's going on with systems. To be honest, we've not the optimization schemes ones we generally get called in to look don't work to start with. But we've never found a single network really that works properly, running at 30 returns. We've got a few over the line ourselves with clients, but you walk into a heat network out there, you can guarantee there's loads wrong with it. I think the results of these optimization schemes will prove that beyond shadow of a doubt. Many sites have been supposedly optimized already, but still they don't work, with a lot of the problems going unfound due to a lack of experience and a lack of data. So we find optimizers tend to focus on the little bits that they know. With a heat network is more of a chain, so with the weakest link. So if you can focus on one or two links in the chain that you understand, but we're finding they're completely missing other links which are key to the operation. So if you walk into a scheme that's supposedly already been optimized, it still won't work. A lot of this is down to BMS. Existing BMS technology, say, hides problems. It makes it impossible to gain invisibility. I mean, these are the systems that run the networks. These are the systems that tell you what's wrong. They're the alarming systems. Simon mentioned redundancy. The best spent money on any network is to put in visibility sensors, alarms. Then when things have failed, then you can fix them. So redundancy is pointless without alarms. If your primary device fails and it falls back to the second one and nobody knows it, well, then the second one will fail and it's down. So BMS is the key to this. It's really get some information like BESA has been to HIUs. BMS has to take the same step change in quality for this to work, full stop. Okay, heat meter data. So heat meter data is used a lot in optimization. It's a very useful tool. It indicates there are problems, but it cannot highlight the true causes, and it misses a great deal. So a lot of the reasons why we think optimizations aren't working properly is because people are just focusing on what they've got, which is heat meter data. A lot of heat networks have control loops, so you're controlling pumps to differential pressures, you're sequencing boilers, you're timing them on buffer storage. You're talking control loops here with 30-second time periods. Typical BMS system reports values 15 minutes, and you're lucky to be able to see graphs going back historically. It's completely incompatible with trying to spot the problems. So in a heat meter, the same. Heat meter data is also hard to come by. It's to some degree linked to the financial side of things. It can take weeks getting hold of data, going through the various channels. Often you find heat meter data is missing. There's lots of holes in it. You've got no visibility at all on the secondary side operation. So you're inferring everything from the flow and return temperatures and power. So you don't see valve movements. You don't see the pressure on the secondary side. You can't see the thermostat functions. You can't see what's going on with the boiler returns. It's a very small window on things that are going on. So they're great for a sort of overall, yes, this is the return temperatures are high, this thing's not working, but they're not really there for actually fault finding. Let's say they do not address hydraulic layouts. So a lot of the problems of pipework layouts are completely wrong. Heat meter doesn't address that in the slightest. So really just draw people's attention to the fact that optimization of heat networks requires a proper look at it from top to bottom, not just reading flow and return temperatures. A large part of what we're doing on the optimization for people is getting them ready for heat pumps. So I mean, like I said, we've got years of expertise in combining heat sources to heat loads. Now, Simon also mentioned tertiary systems. To be honest, they are the elephant in the room, more of a herd of elephants. Nothing in the heat network world is going to work until we address tertiary systems. Every single system we're seeing on network optimization was specified at a 10, 20 degree drop. They're all running at less than 10. Heating is a long continuous load for almost half the year. Until you address the tertiary radiators, the heat emitters, the heat sources cannot work properly. So the majority of work on heat networks has to be done on radiator systems. There's been a lot of work done over recent years with a lot of operators on real-time data feedback, trying to work through the standard methods of balancing radiators, and the realization coming about that you need to follow. There needs to be, again, a step change, and they need to be addressed. Money spent on balancing radiators, you cannot fix anything else until the radiators work, to be honest. It's as simple as that. For heat pumps to work, heat pumps run less efficiently at higher temperatures. I mean, some refrigerants are less affected by that, but you need to weather compensate. So you run it hotter on the coldest day of the year than you do in midsummer, simple as. So you're running 60-25 in summer and 75-30 in winter. Again, and radiator temperatures, HIUs, some on the industry have these functions, but if you're going to up and down the primary temperatures on your network, the radiators need to track that. So if you drop there's no point raising your central plant temperature if your radiator temperatures don't go up in step with it, and the other way. So these are some fundamental first principles that we need to address, and can be addressed, and they are being addressed where people are aware of them, but it won't work if you don't address them. Another thing that's coming out of things is actual heat pump technology. So we've sort of come around to CO2 heat pump technology as the perfect match for a heat network. It's inherently the right temperature drops for a network, 60-30, and provided you get the networks commissioned right, so you've got the temperature drops, they match perfectly, and you should be able to get seasonal COPs of 3+. So this is separate for ambient loops. This is the heat side in the buildings. We see ambient loops as more interconnectors between buildings and the wider networks, where heat losses, where the density is low and the pipework losses are high. When you're in high dense areas or you're within the building level, you're at higher temperatures, certainly above domestic hot water temperatures. And plant rooms need upgrading. The hydraulic layouts need changing. Boilers are never sequenced off storage as per CP1 guidance. So that needs changing, or we need to take the address of putting in the heat pumps at the other end, decentralizing things so we can keep central plants going while we bolt on the heat pumps from the other end, and it can be quite a smooth changeover. That's quite a nice approach that's been looked at in places.
Can I give you a 2-minute warning, please, Richard?
2-minute warning, right. Well, very quickly, there's a schematic that we need to get following. Radiator optimization. So that's a typical radiator system. This is real-time data feedback. So this is proper optimizing. So this is looking at a system, optimizing it. So you end up dropping the return temperatures from 65 down to 32, simply by introducing the correct weather compensation on the HIUs. These are key functions. This is where optimizing sits. It's optimizing the technology heat networks. A typical day in optimizing. So this is the sort of thing that optimization involves. It's actually quite simple stuff to find all these problems. It's not rocket science. It doesn't take £20,000. You go in 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock, you strap on 16 sensors or so around the plant room, a few DP sensors and pressure sensors. We spend an hour or so linking that up to our servers to get real-time data out. Then we run across to an HIU. We plug some sensors on there. This is usually done by lunchtime. Then we've got an afternoon of data, real-time data with 5-second intervals. Usually by the end of the day, you've got a very clear picture of everything that's wrong. But we will typically be leaving these things running for a week, a month, so you can start to look up the larger problems and write a proper report. But when we're optimizing networks, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. A day's work, find out what the key problems are, look at the hydraulic layout, and just say where it's not compliant. It's as simple as that, really.
Brilliant. No, thanks very much indeed, Richard. That's a very interesting presentation. I'm sure there'll be many questions coming up in the chat shortly. So thanks very much to Richard. If I can ask you to leave the stage and ask Rob Boyer to come on the stage from AECOM, and Rob will be talking about secondary network losses. So without further ado, over to yourself, Rob.
Thank you very much, Simon. So my name is Rob Boyer. I'm a regional director within AECOM, and I'm responsible for the technical delivery of district heating within a specialist sustainable development group team within the business. And unfortunately, I feel I have to agree with Richard in saying that a lot of the issues that we're seeing are unfortunately very common and very present from the design world. I think I could spend ages just chatting to Richard and probably agreeing with nearly everything he said in his presentation, and looking at ways to solving them. But this presentation is going to be looking at secondary network losses, specifically looking at how we can improve distribution from a design perspective. So it's not looking at the thermal generation side, but it's going to mirror some of the points that Richard has just eloquently quite made. So just a couple of concepts, definitions and performance discussion points, because I feel one of the biggest problems I find when I'm trying to evaluate system performance is a lack of common terminology. So this is taken directly out of CP1. There's primary pipe work, which is typically outside the building, doesn't provide heat directly. Secondary pipe work tends to be internal building distribution when you haven't gone through the final point of sale. So the most common placement of secondary distribution, which this discussion is talking about, is with internal risers and lateral distribution within high density residential developments, but could equally apply to a hospital building if you have heat customers within a building separated from the main wards, or a shopping centre as well. And then tertiary is in dwelling or post final point of consumption or point of sale. And then just another quick series of definitions. We're talking a lot about generations of heat, and we do flick backwards and forwards between generations and also talking about whether it's LTHW. So from what I've seen, there is no adequate terminology for temperatures kind of below low temperature hot water until you get to ambient loop. And there is this creation of a fourth generation system, which, whilst they have been defined within CP1 of systems of less flow temperature less than 60 degrees, what they're actually for is optimization of LZC and principally heat pumps. And then fifth generation is stated as less than 40 degrees, but typically it's got flow temperatures in the 25 degree range. So just understanding loss. So loss. loss has a number of commercial implications as well as technical implications. It can lead to overheating. Running through communal areas, finding it very uncomfortable. In the worst case, I've seen residents with their heating systems turned off and their front doors kept open because the corridors were so warm. There's a cost implication. So loss directly leads to additional cost, which has to be passed on to consumers or could make a heat network commercially unviable to operate. And that can lead to a whole separate situation and complexities in terms of running a system. And this can obviously lead to reputational impact. Losses lead to significant overheating and high costs in the very worst cases. They can lead to customer dissatisfaction. They could appear on BBC Watchdog, news programs, industry articles. Not only does that impact the developer of the system, but it has a wider implication to the industry as a whole. So you get someone moving into a new property with a heat network and they've only heard bad things. All of a sudden you have an uphill battle. One of the things I've not mentioned as an impact of secondary losses is carbon, but I've deliberately removed that because I think that's quite a well understood element. I'm trying to focus on the other areas where secondary losses can really impact. So some of the key factors that actually implicate or implement or manifest with secondary losses is atypically, we've always looked at losses in a power density terminology, watts per meter. If we can reduce the watts per meter, it's a good quality system. That has been quite a traditional approach, but there is now a big push across multiple assessment methodologies, either being voluntary regulation, voluntary guidance or regulation, where we're now looking at annual performance, specifically kilowatt hours per annum. Now, the interesting thing I find is a lot of people think that flow is a factor when looking at heat networks. And in actual fact, it's not. It's the temperature averaged over the year of each individual pipe. It's the length of the pipe, the size of the pipe, and then the insulation applied. And I've deliberately put insulation at the bottom of that list because it's the last thing that should be tackled after you've tackled all these other things. But flow is not a factor. So here's some examples where a relatively traditional, but I would argue quite poor scheme, which I've labeled as historic. This is how things have been done in the past. So we've got 85 flow, 65 return. That's not even discussing the fact whether that's constant or variable temperature. Quite a significant length of total pipe work within the building. The system is oversized. It's at 4 kilowatts per dwelling when you look at all the work. Insulation, it's listed as standard, but it's still pretty good quality insulation. It's fully compliant. And that's still giving us losses of 1,733 kilowatt hours per unit, or 50% of the thermal demand. And the power density is listed as 44.8 watts per meter. I've put that just as an indication of what power that translates to. What I've then done is created a couple of, well, what if scenarios. We tackle each one individually just to see how big an impact they have individually. But when you combine them, they don't have the same level of impact because obviously they all interact with one another. So first off, we reduced the temperatures from 85-65 just to a very simple 70-40. Something as simple as that has reduced our losses from 50% down to 33%. If we reduce the length, so you can see it was gone from 8,000 meters to 4,450, and I will put a slide up on how that was achieved, but it's still oversized. We've gone down to 29% loss. Oversizing, we've taken our diversified load of 4 kilowatts and taken it down to 2.5. Some would still argue, and I think quite rightly, that is still slightly oversized, but I've allowed a modicum of balance in there, and that's taken us down to 44% losses. And insulation. We've improved the insulation from regulatory standards, from building regulations into current CP1 standards, and that's taken us down to 31% losses. So out of all of those examples, reducing the length, admittedly, it depends on how much you can actually implement. It was one of the biggest effects. Temperature reduction was nearly as well received as insulation. The oversizing, there's probably more work to be done, but again, it has a good impact. So all of those things will reduce losses. So how do we design for reduced losses? Well, there are external requirements. I'm referring to obviously building regulations, and building regulations are being updated. There are guidance, of course, within CP1, which then cross-refers to other documents as well. But we are targeting gross performance, and the industry as a whole, I've always felt, focuses very much on components. We're now looking to system assessment. So temperatures. There is a move towards limiting residential flow temperatures to 55 degrees on space heating, and mirroring what Richard said, really looking at the control of return temperatures, more moving to variable volume systems rather than constant volume systems. Length isn't specified in any documentation, but I think it always needs to be challenged, and it is encouraged within the documentation to minimize it, but there are no standards around how much pipework should be installed. There is guidance now on sizing and typical flow rates, but they're still not always being either used, properly applied, or even delivered on site. So we're still seeing real world oversizing. Insulation is specified to a minimum, but we should be encouraging an improvement on insulation. CP1 is a starting point. But ideally, if you've untackled those other things, the economic value of improving of insulation should fall away because you've tackled it via other mechanisms. And then hopefully you can save money by reducing the level of insulation you actually need. So there is a new target within CP1, which again is a voluntary standard of an annual average of 876 kilowatt hours per dwelling, which gives you a loss factor of 1.5 or 32%. If the design work is not undertaken to CP1 standards, you're required or will be required to assume a loss factor of 2, which equates to 50%. So it really is quite desirable to at least take an assessment of heat losses within secondary systems to CP1. So what happens if we bring all these things together? I've highlighted the historic approach, and then I've looked at what could be coming in the future and the big moves. And this is based on a 4th generation system as opposed to a 5th generation system. So we've looked at tackling some of the length. We've reduced the size from 4 kilowatt diversified load per dwelling down to 2.5. We've looked at improved insulation. Everything in concert, all working together, has brought the calculated loss down to 361 kilowatt hours per unit, far below the 876 CP1 requirement. And even the best practice, it's lower than that at 550 kilowatt hours per dwelling, which gives us a loss factor of 1.15. So how do we do this? There are standards already identified, and these are all tables taken out of CP1. There is guidance on temperature, but building regulations is likely to supersede that quite quickly. But the temperature guidance in CP1 is the maximum, and if you actually followed all the maximums, the system probably wouldn't work. It's trying to give you latitude, but we should be pulling those loads down. Certainly moving towards underfloor heating, looking at a lot lower temperature heat delivery systems within the residential environment. Within CP1, there's an illustration of how HIUs can be placed nearer to risers. So we're almost designing them more like soil vent piping systems, because it is the laterals and terminal runs that really have the biggest impact on length, total installed length within a residential development. There's also guidance on sizing, both in diversity analysis, velocity sizing of pipework, and there's a really good worked example within CP1 under Annex D, if you want to follow through how that would actually work. And once again, CP1 advises an enhanced level of insulation performance above and beyond building reg standards. So designing is great, but operating is also another area where things can be optimized. So really echoing what Richard said, we should be designing for operation. You need to understand how a system is operated to design properly and then operate as designed. I'm just wrapping up, Simon. Thank you.
No, I'll just give you a 2-minute warning, Rob.
Thank you, Simon. And one of the key areas where we see operation begin to fail is in return temperatures. That's the one area operators can actually affect. They can't tackle oversizing. They can't tackle poor hydraulics. They can't tackle insulation without actually pulling out installed assets but what they can do is ensure that the equipment that the design and construction team handed over operates as intended. So return temperatures is usually a key area where we can see systems may have been designed right but aren't operating right. But I think we need to be fair to operators and they can only play with the tools they've got. And poor commissioning tends to be a big stumbling block because, again, things are commissioned as components, not as systems. Just as an indication of what that would look like, and this echo Richard's comment about not enough frequency of data. This is hourly data, not even sub 15 minutes. And a system that was supposedly designed for 80-60 rarely saw a return temperature above, I think we've got in there. The VWALK came back as 74 in the middle of winter, and when we dropped it using weather compensation, the return temperatures were actually, rather than 60-30 or actually 60-40, they were 60-57 because there was so little demand on the system. So tackling key issues and looking ahead, we've got to tackle temperature, length, size, and insulation. So we should be pushing down temperatures wherever possible, including the next big challenge, which is domestic hot water. We should be challenging for more risers and reducing laterals and total installed length. We should be looking at operational data and creating operationally data-rich environments to enable optimization of networks, and also ensure we undertake life cycle economic analysis to ensure that we are delivering good value to the developer and the client. And another reason why things are coming, we're on the road to regulation, which has already been inferred. I don't know what the date of formal regulation, but thank you to John for saying that Ofgem are looking to come in and become the regulator for the heat industry. So that's going to push us in a certain direction as an industry. And of course, CP1, mentioned it a few times. It's still a voluntary standard, but I would highly recommend that people review it and at least take elements of it if they don't follow it in full. So yeah, it's a good document to use, and yeah, please have a look at it.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Rob. That was excellent. We'll try to keep everybody to time. Lots of really interesting points, which I hope will raise some very interesting questions at the end. If I could ask Rob to leave the stage, thanks very much indeed, and invite Phil Pettit from Suez to come on the stage and to talk about the advantages of ice picking for new and existing district heating networks. So thanks very much indeed, Phil, and over to you.
Thanks, Simon. And yeah, hello, everyone. My presentation is slightly different to Richard's and Rob's, who's gone before me. Ice picking is a process that's probably more appropriate for improving the efficiency of the commissioning phase, but efficiency nonetheless. So I'm going to talk to you about the advantages of applying it to new and existing networks. My name's Phil Pettit. I've been working with ice picking for about the last 10 years now. We're involved in the water industry, but there's been recently a lot of increased upturn in the uptake in district heating. And for that reason, we thought we'd come and talk to you all about it and tell you how it works and how it can be applied in this sector. So just a few introductory slides about how ice picking works in general. I'm going to talk about using it on district heating networks and the benefits it can bring, and then also a few case studies, and if we've got time, a few other areas of application. So firstly, what is ice picking? It's a pipe cleaning technique which uses a two-phase ice slurry. So we use a small amount of salt in there as a freezing point suppressant, but other than that, it is just ice, just water. If we can just roll that video, Tom, please. So very visual process. Hopefully we don't have the jingle on. Yeah, so this is a clear plastic pipe, 8-inch in diameter, with sand in the bottom. There's a water flow of 15 litres a second. We introduce the ice through a 2.5-inch fit-in. It's a fire hydrant, but in a district heating network, that would be an existing fill and drain vent. You can insert the ice in through the existing fit in there, and you see it forms up to the full size of the pipe. And it doesn't push the material in front like a piston. It just lifts the material and trains it within the ice and carries it out. And key that flow is lower than the water flow. So you don't need velocity to do this. So you can actually impose this very easily on a network. The ice then progresses through the network, collecting all the built up sediment in the pipework, and then it's discharged again through another existing fitting, again 2.5 inches in this case, but anything of 25 mil to sort of 40 is adequate. And you can see the nature of the ice there. It's a very soft slurry, and you can see there it's carrying all the material that's entrained within that ice. It carries it out for safe disposal. So can I shift back to the slides now, Tom? Thank you very much. So the key benefits across all applications that we do it for, it's very, very fast, which means it can be done during shutdowns. It takes a couple of hours for a large pipe and less for a small pipe. It's really effective. It removes large quantities of sediment, even at low velocities, and the ice will so if it ever does get stuck, which is very rare, you can allow the ice to melt. So that's, again, very useful for existing networks where you don't know where the pipe runs are. You're not exactly sure what's in there. It's very low risk for existing networks. And again, it can be applied using existing fittings. This one, if you could just run this one, Tom, this gives it's actually from a different type of network. It's from a food network. But again, it just illustrates how, if we can turn that sound off, Tom. So the bottom pipe's being flushed, which is obviously the traditional way of can we have that sound off, Tom? Is that all right? Thanks. Anyway, I can talk over it if needs be. So you can see the top pipe being ice picked. Very quickly picks up all of that material, removes it from the pipe, changing diameters, bends, no issue. And then there's a short flush to push the ice out of the pipe. And then you are left with essentially a clean network full of clean water afterwards. So you can see the bottom one where it's being flushed. There is the top pipe is relatively clean on the small diameter, but the larger diameter pipe is still carrying a lot of fouling due to the lower velocity in that lower pipe. And if you were just going on the colour of that discharge alone, that'll do for that one, Tom. If we can shift that off, thank you very much. So if you were just going on the colour of that discharge alone, you might think that pipe is clean, but you can obviously see that in the larger diameter pipework, there's still a lot of material present. So most of the stuff we do is between sort of DN80 and DN450, so medium-sized pipes, generally transmission pipes, and we've been operating in the water industry since 2011. So we've got an awful lot of experience. It happens around the world, so it's not a startup. I've been doing this for 10 years, very well established, but just of late it does seem to have been taken on quite a lot in the District Energy Association and on new sites around the country. So in terms of how the process works on a district heating section, you will attach the pipe to a fill and drain vent, attach our kit, pump ice slurry in, so you form an ice pig in the pipe, which might be 100 meters long, for example, depending on the length of your pipework. And that is then pushed through the pipework using a water source, which can be from either a water tanker or it can be from the energy centre. So you can either push it through using the fitting on the pipe or from the energy centre itself. And as it goes through the network, collects all that material, it's then discharged again at another existing vent, and all of that waste is collected in a waste tanker and is removed from the site. So unfortunately, it doesn't work like a traditional flushing system. We can't just put it in one place, go through all the loops simultaneously. We have to break it down into small operations. And each of those might only take half an hour, but the key is that we can be flexible to how your network is, and so it can be applied to all types of network. There are options. You can put it in through the branch mains and clean it into the main line and then clean the main line, or you can, it's very adaptable in case you don't have access to all points, essentially. But the key thing here, the take home is the difference from the BISRIA requirement. So the minimum flow rate for BISRIA shown for 100 mil there is 10.5 litres a second. So you've got to hit 10.5 litres a second to get that cleanliness. For ice pigging, that's less than 2.5. So really, significantly easier flow rates to hit. And as you go on up the diameter scales, the difference becomes more and more pronounced. So 250 mil pipe, BISRIA, you need 72 litres a second, and the optimal flow for ice is less than 15. But we can actually, that's the optimal. We can still operate at maybe 10 litres a second. So that gives a lot of advantages where you don't need to generate such high flow rates in the commissioning phase, which can often be quite challenging. You can push it through with any fluid, so we need a water source. But apart from that, it can be pre-softened, it can be demin. So depending on what the ongoing requirements for the water for the heating network are, that can be used, and it can be helped for the ongoing for the ongoing water treatment. You can use something that's concordant with your plan. In terms of just some general considerations, it's usually applied to the primary transmission network, not to internals, so not to secondary systems or tertiaries. So that's where it's usually applied. And if it is in the the newly installed phase, it tends to be after the hydrostatic pressure test, before any chemicals have been dosed. And it's worth saying that this doesn't replace the ongoing water treatment requirement. It doesn't involve any chemistry at all. So, if you are using a treated system or a demin system, that still has to be done following on. This is just a process to remove all of the particulate material from the network at the construction phase, or also during a shutdown. So if you're doing a shutdown, it can remove all of the material that's built up in the network to give you a clean and efficient network. Key advantages then is it's very fast. Most networks can be cleaned in a single day. You don't have to achieve the same flushing velocities, which again makes it very easy to apply. And these bring in overall cost effectiveness. So it is more expensive than a flushing technique, but because it is so fast, the downtime is so minimal, and there aren't any unforeseen delays either, which can be important in a shutdown or commissioning phase. And there's environmental benefits as well. So for low energy use, pumping costs, and there's no chemicals to dispose of. So, we haven't really marketed this at all, but there has been an uptake in the area. So we know that the advantages do seem to stick. So it's driven by demand from clients and installers and the people on these calls. So we thought it would be worth just coming and talking about it and seeing if we can work more closely with the industry. So we're trying to engage more with the industry now to find out what other benefits we can bring. So in terms of sort of case studies then, this is a small network we did for Enertech. And this is a small network. All of the ice was inserted in the middle pot where you can see that leg coming out. And we would send two pigs to the right, one down the flow and return, 2 pigs to the left down the flow and return. And each of those operations took 20 minutes. So there's still some time to move plant around site, but that whole pipe work, that whole network was cleaned in sort of half a day. So, you can see the advantages that can bring in terms of reducing downtime and reducing commissioning time. And likewise, this is a larger network, so 1,600 meters of DN 300 and a couple of smaller branches. That was all cleaned in a single day. So that pipe work can be in service 2 weeks earlier, or you're saving, several weeks based on removing the need to dynamic flush. You've saved 2 weeks during either your outage time or your commissioning phase. And that was only 10 litres a second available from the energy centre. So again, just goes to highlight how quickly you can do this even without massive flow rates available. The final case study is some work we did for Enertech. They installed over 4,000 meters at Wembley. Obviously, there's an awful lot of work going on at Wembley at the moment. And it's a really complex combination of large diameter spine mains with small diameter branches, which is quite tricky for the commissioning process due to those big range of sizes. And again, each of these was cleaned in a single day. The 4 phases, 3 were cleaned in a single day, and 1 phase, or phase 3 rather, was cleaned in 2 separate sittings. And so you can see there the flow rate, the maximum flow rate required, even on a DN250, was 12 litres a second. So, you know, that can make much easier in that commissioning phase. So just to kind of open it up, really, I mean, this is, as I've said, we are predominantly in the water industry, and we know that there are a lot of applications out there, particularly in district energy, where, you know, this process might change things quite significantly. So this is a fin fan cooler, an air water heat exchanger, where we were able to clean this network, this heat exchanger in half a day, as opposed to taking off each of the individual caps, jetting it. So it was able to be cleaned in half a day as opposed to a couple of weeks. So this probably brings in the possibility of doing this type of clean more regularly, so to increase the efficiency of your heat exchangers and that type of thing more regularly, rather than doing it periodically on a 10-year shutdown or what have you. And there are potentially lots of applications where this might be true. So, you know, by all means, reach out and see if there are anything where this may be of use, particularly in plant rooms or heat exchangers.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Phil. I think most of you've wrapped up there. That's great. Thanks very much indeed for trying to keep the time. Very interesting presentation, and really appreciate it. If I can ask Phil to leave the stage, and for David Whitfield from Elsator to join us. And David's going to talk to us about performance and cost benefits of chemical-free treatment for district heating networks. So thanks very much indeed, David.
Great, thank you. Yeah, my name's David Whitfield. I'm the MD of Elsator UK. Elsator have been in operation for 50 years across Europe. We only opened a UK office in 2019. I've actually been using the product since 2004. And I'm in a very fortunate position of being able to say that I've never known the product not to work. It always gets results. And it's chemical-free water treatment, which hopefully most of you have seen starting to take off in the UK now with recognition within the CIBSE guides. So Elsator, chemical-free water treatment for closed-loop networks. On the right, there's some of the major projects that we're already on in the UK. Bun Hill, which is the world's first project taking heat off the London Underground. That was a conversion from chemicals to Elsator. So our product was retrofitted to clean through an existing network and to convert it to chemical free. Barking Riverside at the bottom there, which again started off its life as a chemical network, but very early stages when it's only at 20,000 litre capacity. It's been converted to Elsator to turn it to chemical free to get rid of some early problems there. And then Stoke City Network is just starting afresh from new with Elsator, and then more recently Swaffham Prior, where hopefully we're going to be working alongside some ice pigging. So very interesting to see the last presentation. So we first started in 1970, 70,000 global installs. And we can conservatively estimate we're stopping 3,500 tonnes of inhibitors and biocides from entering our waste streams each year. We achieve the world's most stringent water quality standards, including VDI, which is one most prevalent in manufacturers' guidance documents. And the last year, VDI has been recognised in CIBSE Heat Network Code of Practice. There's table 17 in there, which gives you the full VDI parameters. And in the heat network design guide, where CIBSE actually state that the DMIN approach is the best for large networks and for networks with low and intermittent flow situations. So we're working a lot with low carbon consultants and clients who want to get away from chemicals. For some of our clients, they don't actually have any issues with their water treatment, but they just want to get rid of their chemicals off site as part of their carbon commitment. And you see some of the big brands that we're working with there, Vital, LNQ, Fairview, British Land, all part of their environmental policies. LNQ was one of the early adopters, and we are only 10 sites away now from every single one of their district heating networks being chemical free. They've really ramped up their conversion based on their early results, and are keen to be the first housing association that can say that they are completely chemical free on the district side. So we have two core products: Elysator, which is to clean and maintain the water using pure magnesium anodes. That works as a side stream filter, same as air and dirt separator, but it has pure magnesium inside, which controls our pH and conductivity and dissolved oxygen. And then we have a filling device which converts the raw mains water into demineralized water. So it takes out the limes, minerals and salts, gives us a controlled pH, exactly where we want to be, zero conductivity, and the carbon dioxide removed. So giving us really good pure water to fill our systems up to start off with. This is why we say that VGI is the most authoritative guideline in the world when it comes to water treatment. The comparison with BG29, which is, in my opinion, very flaky. I don't think it can be really called a guidance document because it doesn't actually give you everything you need to know. If you look at the parameters there, 5 of the key parameters are left up to the water treatment specialist to decide what they're going to be for each individual project. Whereas VDI is very specific. There's no wriggle room for anybody. So for the building owner operator, the network operator, the manufacturer, there's clear guidance everyone has to follow to make sure that we are in a non-corrosive state. And it's really adopting 18th century science. Very simple. Control the dissolved oxygen, control the pH, control the conductivity, then you control corrosion. And the other parameters that are in that chart, the chloride, the copper, the iron, those are the parameters you will get because you'll be in a non-corrosive state. You're not going to have any iron levels, you're not going to have any copper. The chloride's going to be controlled because you're in that non-corrosive state. It's very simple. School level chemistry, it's all it is. How does it work? Very simply, cutaway of one of our domestic light commercial units, but our large industrial units work the same. The difference being is that the larger units have a larger vessel, larger anodes and more anodes. But the principle we can see is like an air and dirt separator. You get that natural vortex cyclone effect going on inside. Air is dispersed to the top, dirt to the bottom, and we have a dry magnet to keep the magnetite in place. And in the middle of that cyclone, we have a single or a bundle of pure magnesium anodes. Anode sacrificial, so it is corroding, but for any metal to corrode, it needs oxygen. So the very first thing we do is remove the dissolved oxygen from the system, and oxygen is the biggest cause of corrosion. So that dissolved oxygen is consumed to sacrifice the anode, and that anode, when it corrodes, releases magnesium hydroxide, which stabilizes our pH between 8.2 and 10. And that in turn breaks down the hardness and lowers electrical conductivity. So the objective of 18th century science, electrochemistry, and VDI are all achieved by the sacrificial anode approach. All stuff what we've all done in the school classroom at some point. The benefits to our clients, there's proven benefits to cost, reliability of the network, sustainability and efficiency. The latest Danish guide on district heating that we often relate to in the UK, and I believe that following the Danish guides on water treatment is the final piece in the jigsaw. We've followed them on design temperatures, on deltas, on heat interface performance, operating and maintenance, but we've ignored what they've said about water treatment up until recently. They say that, that demineralized water is the most sustainable and most economical way to treat large-scale networks. And also, on a district network, if you do have leaks, you don't want chemicals going into the ground because it's going to end up on your water table. As I said earlier, CIBSE have now recognised VDI as an approach for large networks and for low and intermittent flow situations. Few projects that we've worked on. The very first project that we worked on was for L&Q. As I said earlier, they now have gone into a rollout plan on their existing stock, and all their new builds now have us in from the outset. So the site issue had poor water quality since opening. It was only 4 years old when we started work on there, but it was already suffering from really bad corrosion. And sadly, like one of the earlier speakers from thermal integration earlier said, a lot of systems are in a bad way. We see systems that are on their knees 18 months, 2 years, 3 years from new, when they're falling apart with corrosion and issues of water quality. And that causes loads of problems. No heating, no hot water, breakdowns, HRU manufacturers getting in the neck because their HRUs aren't working correctly. Loads of residents' complaints. This particular site, as you can see, Vital Energy adopted this site and to try and help L&Q out. When they started, it's in for a big shock because they had 2 to 3 on-site engineers there all the time. They're dealing with 7 to 10 call-outs per day. They were quoted £27,000 for another chemical flush with no guarantees of success. And this project actually had plastic pipe work. So plastic pipe work, for those of you who aren't aware, even those that have oxygen diffusion barriers, the oxygen diffusion barrier depletes with temperature increase. So even though the manufacturer might say, yeah, it's all good, we've got oxygen diffusion barrier, what they don't tell you is as the temperature goes up, the effectiveness of that barrier comes down. And although that plastic pipe might not corrode, the oxygen then attacks the next thing he can get his hands on. So it starts attacking the metal components in the system. So historically, they were trying to deal with this with chemicals, which didn't have a chance, not because chemicals don't work, but in this situation, it couldn't control the dissolved oxygen. So for under £10,000, our equipment was installed. It's a 90-day proof of concept. It was signed off after 45 days because of the improvements in the system. Significant saving against a chemical flush. After 3 months, Vital dropped it down to 1 engineer. And then the same time, the following year, the call-outs, we still had some issues to deal with, historic stuff needed rectifying, but they got down to 2 a week from 7 to 10 a day, just by improving the water quality. Here, major district heat network developer and operator. We do work on a lot of old sites, some of them which are leaky. And to keep on top of them, the top-up water is demineralized. So this particular operator would prefer to do that than keep putting chemicals into the system to try and keep on top of the corrosion, because they can't, on this particular network, the practicalities of digging up the roads to find the leaks is very problematic. It's not like new systems where you have good leak detection systems built into them. Some of the old systems don't have them. So this particular network operator has reduced their operation to 26%. They get their money back within 3.5 years, and the removal of the chemical drums from site is no longer a cost. Estimated they were spending £3,000 per annum. They get them with the reduction costs in reduction in administration, and material safety data sheets no longer required. Reduce the need for hazardous waste notes and related health and safety. So cost handling is removed, and the removal of handling of 30 40 drums of chemicals each month. And then across their network, they're reducing their manpower, which was required to continually clean strainers. When our kit is first installed, we do increase the operation and maintenance work because we're going to break down the debris, we're going to shift it, it's going to end up in strainers, so you are going to need initial hands-on strainer cleaning. But once you've done it, it doesn't come back, unlike systems that are continually having problems. It keeps coming back, you keep blocking strainers, we'll actually stop that progress. HA install of 16,000 new build development. This was Barking Riverside, and the engineering graduate for L&Q calculated the investment into LSATA compared with their existing costs, and a return just over 3 years. And this was because it's being retrofitted to an existing scheme, so it didn't go in at the outset. When it goes in at the outset, we believe we're cost neutral. And the operation costs reduced to 6.2% of current regime. So currently spending 13,500 on chemicals, and that's going to drop down to £1,818 for a set of anodes. So it's much easier to look after. Again, no cost, less reporting, strategic water sampling rather than monthly. So there's going to be electronic corrosion monitor on there rather than regular sampling. And then you only need to sample if you have a problem from your corrosion monitor. Less opportunities for water quality drift. It's easy to maintain, and it's one of their reasons for adopting this, because it's a phase development, and every time they bring a phase on, they're no longer going to have the problems of cleaning that phase, getting it ready. They can just introduce it to the network, and the LSATA will maintain and deal with whatever new water comes into the system. And their forecast is 10% increase in plant life, 10% increase in buried pipe life.
Okay, David, can I give you a 1 minute warning, please?
Okay, right, I better wish for these. Swaffham Prior, very quick one. Village Swaffham Prior, a lot of you would have heard about this. We estimate we're going to set, from the design, is 10,000 litres of chemicals are not going to be used. Reduction in operation costs, in pre-com costs, and making the whole system more environmentally friendly. They've got a very eco design there, so they don't want to be filling it up with chemicals. And dirty water uses more energy. We all know that glycol lowers efficiency and it requires more power. Exactly the same requires the dirty water. Dirty water does need more energy to move around, increases pump power and reduces boiler efficiencies. Studies in Norway found that we can save up to 5% with a clean network. Biggest issue of water quality is PIC valves and HIUs. We've done a recent project with Fairheat, where Fairheat took the meter data, and from the meter data themselves, they could see that most of the HIUs were in bypass because the valves have been corroded to such an extent that they wasn't closing. A couple of references there from clients where we've saved money on dosing, as well as a much more efficient system overall, because things aren't going wrong. And one from Vital there, since we've installed our equipment, big reduction in call outs of box strainers, greater overall performance, which is why they're rolling this out to all their sites. Service is very easy for everybody. Simple swing meter on the front of our unit tells you exactly how the system's performing. That's just measuring the output from the anodes and letting you know exactly what's going on. Falls into the red, you need to service it. When it's in the green, everything's okay and it's doing what it should be doing. And then bacteria, the environment that we create for bacteria, these are all the bacteria that we get in our systems which cause problems. The range that we settle out around about 9.4 pH. We've got no oxygen in the system and low conductivity. If you look at all the different bacterias, Pseudomonas need between 4 and 8 pH, and we're above that. Aerobic bacteria can survive up to 9.5, but not without oxygen. We take the oxygen away. Non-aerobic does not like pH above 8, and we're above that. SRBs like pH between 4 and 8, we're above that, and we remove the biofilms. And then NRBs like to feed off nitrate. Well, we don't have inhibitors, and if they are in there, we strip them away. So we're providing a much better environment for preventing corrosion and making sure we don't have bacteria in our systems. And it all adds up to a much more efficient system, lower running costs, lower startup costs, lower maintenance costs, and a more reliable network.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks very much indeed, David. Much appreciated. Tom, if you don't mind removing David's stream, and if I can invite Rob, Phil and Richard to come back and join us. We've got a few questions in the chat that I'd like to cover off. I'll just give Richard a second to join as well. So just while they're joining, David, point for you, more of a lead actually. Steve's put in the chat from Equans that he'd like you to reach out and talk about your product with him. His emails in the question section if you haven't picked that one up. So that's good. Going to Phil, the case studies, question from Daniel Johncock. Case studies where ice picking is being implemented more regularly than the 10 to 15 years FM cycle, and is that achieving energy savings? So any thoughts on that one, Phil?
Not currently. We've only, in the UK at least, we've only been operating on these types of network for the last 4 or 5 years, and none of them have been cleaned again after the other. So we've done a few things in Paris. We've done some work in Climate Fast in Paris where we've gone and cleaned that a couple of times, but that's basically going around not doing the same section again. So just kind of ongoing maintenance, but we don't have anything like that because it's not been going long enough, unfortunately.
Okay, no worries at all. Rob and Richard, you saw the question from Ian Spencer about the skill gap. And I suppose just give you an opportunity for sort of 30 seconds. I mean, this has been talked about for years now. In no more than 30 seconds, Rob first, then Richard second. What do you think the best way of filling the skills gap is that we've got to that you've identified?
2 things. We need a framework of project delivery that ensures quality and standard recognition, and then we need a data-rich environment that loops operation back into the design loop so designers can learn from mistakes.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much. Yep, designers learning from mistakes, I think, is a really good point. Richard,
As
what do you think? Sorry, Richard, how do we address this skills gap, the lack of intelligent understanding engineering?
Data. Nobody wants to go to training. We're doing training course for 2 years, and only one person's ever been on it, even though it's free. Basically, if you've got enough data and you refuse to take acceptance of a site until it's performing exactly as it should, people will very quickly have the motivation to learn to do it properly because they'll be losing money. Simple as.
Okay, cool. Yeah, mining data. That's really good. A question for you, Richard, from Christian in the chat. Talking about, I won't read all of it, but essentially it's talking about, in summary, what hot water waiting time you feel is acceptable for residents. His full questions in the chat, so I'll leave you to have a quick read, Richard.
Yeah, it depends on the time of day. So generally, first draw off of the day, people are happy to take a little bit of a delay. Combi boilers are up to 60 seconds. So first draw off the day, people don't even register it if it's like 30 seconds delay. When you're in a property and you're actually running taps, you sort of want more like 5 to 10 seconds, really, want fairly quick response. So you're generally looking at the under 15 seconds during the day, but I'd say an initial first draw of the day, people are kind of happy up to 60 seconds.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much. If speakers would like to scroll down a bit, there's a question from Michael Taylor. Is anybody brave enough to take that one on? It's a bit of a techie question. I think Michael's from Cardiff University. So it's talking about combined heating and cooling networks in research literature often prescribe either non-directional pipe flows or unidirectional circulating loop. What problems can you foresee with those hydraulic layers? Anybody fancy giving that one a go?
Well, let's assume that your hydraulic layout is actually correct, which I think probably Richard would pick up, and most of them aren't correct, but let's assume that they are correct. Even if they're designed correctly, you need a really good control system, and I don't mean plant level of control. It's more almost like a SCADA type system that can monitor pressures across the network, feed it all back, and actually make a decision-making system. And again, I'm speaking from a design perspective. I've seen multiple control specs that don't address those sorts of requirements because you do get neutral points on networks. designers like saying, my peak is here, I designed for peak. Well, that's 1 hour in 8,760. There's all the other hours where it's not in that condition. And that's what they need to start considering. And again, operational data will help support that. But also designers tend to think max design, and that's the only condition. Plus 20% margins and all the other bits and pieces they like to throw in.
Yeah, no, agree. Richard, any final thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got domestic hot water in the play, then it can't be bidirectional, because you've got to have heat going that way for domestic hot water. If it's heating only, then you can have heating go one way, cooling the other way. They're separated. But bidirectional circuits are commonplace in and out of buffer stores. You've got bidirectional circuits where they pull out, they're charging or they're discharging. So yeah, they fit in the hydraulic layouts. They're quite common bidirectional sections of pipe work, but it's on specific parts on specific applications that that's what you need to do. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much indeed. I'm conscious of keeping to time, and we're out of questions from the delegates. I'd just like to remind all delegates that the copies of all the presentations will be available together with the contact details for the speakers. That's already borne fruit from one of the speakers in the chat, and also it will be on our UKDEA YouTube channel. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank very much to David, Rob, Phil and Richard for presenting. And if you'd like to leave the stage, we'll go on to session 3. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'd like to invite Maria Kalli to come onto the stage from VEX. And Maria will be talking about underground flow measurement as part of network optimization. I can see Maria there, so I'll hand straight over. Thanks, Maria.
Thanks. Good afternoon from Finland and midday to the UK. My name is Maria Kalli from VEXve. We are a world-leading manufacturer of district heating valves, having 3 factories in Finland. And I'm quite sure many of your networks do have our pre-insulated valves or then above grounds in your power plants and heat plants. Definitely valves are important part of the system efficiency, choosing the right kind of valves. But still today, what we will focus is a new generation flow and temperature measurement, and especially a case from the city of Espoo, where this underground flow and temperature measurement is a part of a huge optimization platform. If I briefly start with the city of Espoo, it's located in the southern side of Finland, in the capital region, and about 300,000 inhabitants. And the energy utility operating in that area is Fortum. It's a huge Finnish state-owned energy company, which is operating in 10 countries. They have district heating networks in 7 cities in Finland, Poland, and Norway. About 20,000 employees, and among their subsidiaries is a company such as Uniper. Then if we look at the Fortum Power and Heat in Finland, to put it in the right scale, what kind of a project we are speaking about, they have 1,300 kilometers of district heating network, 5 power plants, about 40 heat centers and heat pump stations. Their district heating production capacity is about 2,000 megawatts. And Espoo, among many other cities around the world, they are working for a cleaner world, and their target is to be carbon neutral by 2030. And big part of that is decarbonizing their district heating network. Currently, there are 2 coal-fired carbon CHP plants, which will be phased out by 2025. And on this slide, you can see the steps of Espoo Clean Heat, this decarbonization program, and how those plants already have been replaced and what kind of plants there are. For example, two-way district heating, demand response will be used, bio-oil plant, air-to-water heat pumps, generally geothermal heat, using excess heat from large-scale data centers and so on. So instead of having a couple of huge power plants like many cities used to have in the old days, we are moving like everybody else towards a direction where you have several more volatile heat sources around the city. And when we move towards this more complicated system, it's no longer possible to steer that network and the power plants manually. Automation is needed, optimization is needed, and they are required to enable carbon neutrality in the future. And in this case, Espoo Clean Heat, they have 8 major project parts in terms of the system optimization. So firstly, it's local automation and communication solutions. So it means the power plants can be remotely steered and also the pumping stations. Secondly, there are heating system level automation and control rooms, which are under 24/7 control room concept. Then there's a digital twin, which is a detailed digital twin of the network, covering everything starting from the power plant through networks, pumping stations until the customers. And that tool is used for designing, operating, and optimizing the network. Also under this Espoo Clean Heat project, heat demand forecasting is being used. Weather stations and weather forecasts are used for optimization. Then in point 6 are the network sensors, which we will look a little bit later in the coming slides. Also optimizing energy consumption in buildings and demand response is being used. And finally, as the 8th part of this project is a sector connection between heat and electricity, giving flexibility for both in this volatile environment. Where we as a Växjö are part of is the parts which I have marked here in green. So we are delivering the network sensors, we are providing the data to a digital twin. And looking a little bit more detailed about the digital twin and how that is being used for optimization. So firstly, this digital twin, it's an accurate dynamic offline model for general design of the heating network and for future investment analysis. So this part of the model, it's an offline model and it's used for planning. But what is quite revolutionary is that it's being combined with an online model, which is used for operation and optimization. So there's a real-time district heating network model that is constantly up to date, and it optimizes the operation. So for this part, we are feeding the underground data about the flow, about the temperature. And this tool, it also provides this kind of what-if analysis tools for the operators who are running the network. So they can test what happens if they lift up or reduce heat here, what happens with the flow, what happens with the temperatures in different part of networks. And having said in the beginning, the size of the network, it's a huge network, ring networks. starting up a pumping station in one point definitely changes the flow direction and the complete dynamics in the network in the other parts. So it's more and more important to know what happens in the network and how we are doing it. This is a map of the Espoo region. You can see very small green dots, but here there are 34 locations where we have installed this kind of calorimetric sensors, which are measuring flow in the pipeline and also the temperature. This is being measured every 10 minutes, and then the data is being transmitted through a LoRaWAN network to our iSense Online cloud system. You can see a screen capture from the system on the right-hand corner, showing the flow rate and temperature. And from this online system, there are API interfaces to Fortum's digital twin so that they know exactly what is happening in their network. Just a couple of technical details. So we are measuring with this device, we're measuring the flow rate with the range of 0 to 400 centimeters per second. Then the device is multiplying the flow rate with the cross-sectional area of the pipe, and that's how we're getting the volumetric flow rate that's going through this pipe. The device, it collects and transfers all measured data. It's powered by batteries, so there is no local electricity supply needed. The data is being transferred also wirelessly via LoRaWAN network. And as a standard, we are sending the information every 15 minutes, but there can be variation, like in the case of this Espoo Clean Heat project, we are actually sending data every 10 minutes. It just means that it's then using a little bit more batteries than sending every 15 minutes or more longer time. This iSense Flow, which is the name of the product we are using for this optimization platform, it's part of our iSense product family. Other products are iSense Chamber, which is for chamber monitoring, water level in the chamber. Then there is iSense Opti, which is for monitoring pressure and temperature in the network, and also iSense Pulse, which is for automated leak detection. To mention some public references, for example, in the UK, E.ON is using our iSense Opti in their networks in Drayton Garden Village and Cranbrook. And about the iSense Pulse, I gave presentation last year at the UKDEA, also this kind of webinar, and a lot of interested companies about the leak detection, and discussions have continued after that. If you want to learn about more of the user cases and reference stories, please follow us on LinkedIn, where you will find a lot of case stories about the iSense products, projects where we have supplied our products, of course valves, but also these iSense products for optimization and system efficiency purposes. You will find also reference stories on our web pages if you visit there. And of course, if you put into contact with me, I will provide you more details and more info. And And also any questions that might come up here right now will be responded to you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Maria. That's very good. And thank you very much for keeping to time. Much appreciated. Very interesting presentation about the product that you offer. So if I could ask Maria, if you don't mind leaving the stage, and I could invite Adam Raymond from SWEP to join us. Adam is planning to present on his two-stage system for improved heat network efficiency. Adam, are you there? I think your microphone and camera appear to be off at the moment. Hopefully you can find the buttons.
Here I am.
Excellent.
I changed it in the settings and it needed changing below. But anyway, I'm here. So you can hear me okay, Simon?
Hear you and see you. I will leave you to your presentation. Thank you, Adam.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be back at the UKDEA conference again. I've seen a lot of familiar names in the chat room and on the questions. So I'm going to talk today about our two-stage heat exchanger for improving heat network efficiency. Some of you might have seen this before. I believe I have presented another version of this. We've slightly improved it, added a few more slides at another UKDEA event. And then, of course, I did this live in person, which was really nice to do for the first time in a long time at Future Build. But anyway, we'll make a start. So just a little bit about SWEP. For those that don't already know, we are brazed plate heat exchanger manufacturers. We've been doing so since 1983. We only manufacture brazed heat exchangers in various different sizes, from small ones that go in your boiler all the way up to the large ones that you'll see in district energy plant rooms. So we like to think that we're quite good at what we do. We have quite some focus in one area. And although it's a relatively simple product, heat exchanger, we see it as quite an important part of the energy transformation that we're going through, that just seems to be gathering apace and developing quicker with certainly all the developments that are going on at the moment. So, you know, we feel it's a good, it's the interface between all these different energy sources, and particularly in district energy. If we have a look at the roadmap here, the clean island, as we call it, all the different parts where the heat exchanger will fit in. So we're going to look at where you might use a two-stage heat exchanger. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the application in the substation area and for hot water, and what the other alternatives are. So I think it's important to give a background, because a lot of the heat networks at the moment are using locally produced hot water in the apartment through a HRU. So I'm going to give you some background there and then talk in more detail about the innovation, how the two-stage works and how it delivers the benefits. And then finally, I'll explain a little bit more the actual benefits, how it can help increase the efficiency of a district heating system, either fitted from new or possibly as a retrofit solution as well. So onto the application. A lot of you will be familiar with the sort of image on the left, and apologies if it's not too big or too clear for everyone. This is what we're used to seeing in, I would say, the majority of the UK market installations. We have the district energy or the network energy, if it's in the plant room in the building, coming in, going into each dwelling, and then in each dwelling we've got two heat exchangers, one for space heating, one for hot water. This is the typical approach, and this is quite common. The benefits here are that we get hydraulic separation at the apartment level. There has been some concerns in the UK market about leaks if it's a different type of system, if it's direct, as we see here on the right hand side. If you can imagine a leak occurring in the pipework in this apartment is going to cause problems. So this is not where a two-stage solution would be used. It would be on the apartment on the right-hand side, where we've got what I would call a direct system, and what I'm sure many of you would call a direct system. So we've got plant room in the basement being fed by the energy centre. And then the hot water and the heating is delivered, distributed throughout the building and into each living space or office space, if you will. So this is the application where a two-stage would be useful. So in a way, we're kind of giving you some background on the market developments and how things might look for the UK. This is very common in the Nordics. So, for example, my colleague Krista, who was going to present today, this is the type of system that he has in his apartment building. Where we've got the apartment on the left with the HIU, the apartment on the right is no HIUs, only substations. They're very similar, as you'll all be aware. Substations are generally custom made. There's not a great deal of standardization, whereas the HIUs are generally more standardized with maybe 2 or 3 different outputs. But for all intents and purposes, a substation is basically a large heat interface unit. The working principles are very much the same for both of them. We've got the district energy coming in from the top, the primary side, going into each heat exchanger, a series of metering and control valves, of course, and then delivering indirect and hydraulically separate space heating and tap water as well on demand. When we look at how a substation is constructed to deliver the same result, if you will, but deliver it centrally through all the different dwellings, it's very much the same type of approach. We've got 2 heat exchangers. The one on the left-hand side is for the radiator circuit. The one on the right-hand side is for the tap water. And this is what we would call a parallel system as installed in a substation. The way that a 2-stage heat exchanger works is it's combining the return water from the radiator heat exchanger. I'm not sure if you can all see my mouse pointer here that I'm pointing around. Hopefully you can. But top left-hand side heat exchanger, as the primary comes in, it's traveling down the heat exchanger. It's transferring heat to the radiator circuit. As it comes out the heat exchanger, it then becomes the radiator return, and that goes into the first stage of the 2-stage heat exchanger, which provides preheat for the incoming cold that's coming up through the heat exchanger. As that incoming cold is preheated, it's then traveling to the second stage of the heat exchanger, where it's getting a direct feed from the primary flow. That's lifting the temperature up further, 55, 60 degrees or so, and then coming out to deliver your hot water. It's probably a little bit easier to understand if you imagine the 2 heat exchangers. So we've shown this diagram, but just to be clear, the 2-stage heat exchanger, and one of the innovations that it's not 2 separate heat exchangers, it's still one combined. And here you'll see exactly how it works. So cold main coming in on the right-hand side, as it's traveling along underneath the heat exchanger, it's going up, it's getting the preheat stage, stage 1. It's then going across the heat exchanger, back down. This is the second stage, where it's getting the stage 2, the after heater, if you will, and becoming the hot water final temperature. So the innovation with 2-stage is actually based on one of our on a 2-pass or a multi-pass heat exchanger, and it's just worth mentioning that with the sort of trend towards lower temperature networks, people are looking more and more for close approach in heating. We used to see it, we still do see it a lot in chilled water applications, where, for example, they have a 6-degree let's say an 8-degree supply coming in from the chilled network, and then they want to send out 9 degrees. So what a 1-degree approach. We see that a lot more with heat pumps becoming a center stage for the heat source for networks. And the 2-stage system and the 2-pass system are the same principle. So we're getting essentially a longer heat exchanger in one compact unit. So we are seeing more and more where heat exchangers of a two-pass, similar to the two-stage, are being used in heating applications. It was always chilled, but a lot more in heating these days. Unfortunately, I can't show you the flow animation, which is quite nice, but it gives you an idea of how the flow is going through the heat exchanger and where that extra heat's being transferred. This image here is actually a traditional two-pass heat exchanger. The difference between the two-pass and the two-stage is we have an extra 2 connections at the top on the left-hand side. So what are the benefits of having a two-stage? Why would you opt for that versus a traditional parallel system? So essentially, you're getting a lower return temperature to the primary network, and we can see here, we can quantify that. The difference in the flow rates is quite, you know, interesting. Obviously, it depends. The higher the demand for hot water, the better performance you will get in terms of the extra efficiency, the lower return temperatures. So you know, in different cases, it can be higher or lower, but the net effect is there's quite a decent reduction in district heating flow. So we do see two-stage as being the most efficient solution when you're looking to produce hot water centrally and distribute it through a building. When it comes to the design stage, we can't just look at the hot water side on its own. We have to design sort of 2 units together, if you will. Hopefully, some of you are a little bit familiar with our design tool, SSP. Within SSP, you can actually do the full calculation. So in the top, we've got the radiator unit that we calculate, and then we do the two-stage calculation as well. So you can actually easily compare and contrast different units, and actually a two-stage versus a parallel solution. So you can see that at the very early design stage and see exactly what the benefits you'll get. It's more common, as I've mentioned previously, in the Nordic markets, but we are seeing more interest in centrally produced hot water via substations, and therefore the two-stage is quite interesting for people that are looking at this. We've done some projects in London. The most notable one is Wembley Stadium with Ramboll. There's multiple stages to that, and I believe there's other elements that are coming online soon. And there's been proven results in lowering the network temperature compared to how it would have been with a parallel solution. So just to summarize the key points, so two-stage concept, it's used in substation designs where we're serving multiple heating and hot water outlets. The incoming main cold water is preheated by the return from the radiator circuit, thereby lowering the primary return temperature. There's up to an 11% reduction in the network flow required versus a parallel unit under the same conditions. And all of this is achieved in one heat exchanger, so compact size, less weight, less cost, less material. So that was short and sweet. Hopefully it helps us to keep on time. Any information, project inquiries or anything, my colleague Krista is our main point of contact for business development in the UK, and I'm Adam Raymond as well. So either of us would be happy to help. And of course, I'll be around for the Q&A at the end.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Adam. Much appreciated. It's a very interesting presentation with an innovative product. So that's very helpful. So if I can ask Adam to leave the stage and invite Helen from Evernox to come on to the stage, and Helen will be talking to us about heat network performance monitoring. So over to you, Helen, if you can hopefully hear us.
Thank you, Simon. Just to start a little bit about myself, I have been working with Evernox for the last 4 years. I've got over 10 years of experience from heat networks. Prior to that, I studied energy technology back in Sweden, and I've now also moved back to Sweden, so I'm working remotely towards the UK market. I'm also a certified heat networks consultant and have been since it was introduced about 6 years ago now, I think. So that's me. I'll tell you a little bit more about Evinox at the end of the presentation. So what I would like to look at today is just to have a look at what a typical legacy network might look like, and what effects that will have for the resident, and also look at a few things that might go wrong if you do not have an effective way of monitoring the network. So back to basics. First law of thermodynamics. You do not talk about thermodynamics. Not really, but it states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be converted from one form to another. And our job with heat networks is to ensure that this energy is not converted until it reaches the point where it can be used as something useful. So looking at this example, that's clearly not the case. This is an example of a site where we have a metering and billing contract. We were called in to look at the network because the residents had quite high bills. So what we had access to was the meter data from all the HAUs, and we also had access to the bulk meter data. So we asked the client to send us the gas bill for a time period. So this is over 18 months. And we could see that over these 18 months, they had paid £92,500 for the gas that they had fed into the boiler. So the gas was purchased at 3.25p per kilowatt hour. So that was almost 3 million kilowatt hours worth of gas, which was put into the boiler. The boiler was running at an 80% efficiency, so 20% of the energy was lost in the conversion process in there. This is quite typical, so nothing at all to raise your eyebrows at. But what we then could see was that 2.3 million kilowatt hours worth of thermal heat was delivered from the boiler, but only just over 1 million kilowatt hours were actually delivered to the apartments. So that means that 42% of the energy was lost through the network on the way from the boiler up to the apartments. Obviously, the client still had to recover the £92,500 that they had paid for the gas, but that meant that the unit rate had to increase to 8.5p. So when a network is not running efficiently, it's always the resident that ends up paying for it, and that is quite sad, especially here when you double the cost of the energy for the resident when the network was not running efficiently. So regretfully, this is really not a rare occurrence when it comes to legacy network. It would be really nice to say that that was an odd one out, but it was not. When you look back at the legacy networks, there's an awful lot of them that have very high heat losses. And it really is in all of our interests to ensure or try to prevent this before heat networks get a bad name. Because really the last thing we want to do with the technology that we're advising on is to increase carbon emissions or the cost of the heat, especially now when things are quite expensive as they are anyway. So there will be several contributing factors to the performance of this network that we just looked at. There's many obvious ones. There might be oversized pipe work, there might be larger, which would have larger surface areas and therefore lose more heat. There might be too much pipework in the system, might be insufficient insulation of pipework and valves. But as Rob pointed out in an earlier presentation, the major contributor will be the temperature of the water in the pipework, because obviously as the temperature increases, the heat losses accelerate with the increased temperature. So just to look at a few scenarios of what could happen that would lead to these higher temperatures. So here we're looking at quite a good network. We can see that the flow temperature from the plant room is at 70 degrees. And we can see that when it reaches the HAUs, it's also at 70 degrees. So it's not lost any heat on its way from the plant room up to the units. We can also see that the return temperatures are quite good, about 15 in hot water mode, about 38 in keep warm in heating mode, and 35 in keep warm mode. So this is the ideal scenario. Here is a scenario when it's not ideal. We have not got ideal conditions. So what we're looking at here is the first thing that we're going to notice is that the return temperature in the bulk meter is quite high, and it's not showing on this screen, but the flow rate is also high. Now, depending on what data you've got access to, it will take you longer or shorter to figure out what is going on. If you only have access to the bulk meter readings, you're going to have to run around the network and physically inspect each point to see what is going on. If you have also got access to the meter data within the apartments, you're going to be able to identify which apartments you've got these problems in. So here we can see that there's the yellow units that are causing the high return temperatures. But again, I think Richard mentioned this earlier, to be able to further analyze what is going on, you also need access to the tertiary system to see what is happening. And also to see what the valves and components within the units are doing. So in this case, we've been able to remotely analyze it, and we can see that the valve is in a closed position, but we're still getting a flow. So there is a bypass through the unit that is uncontrolled. Most of the time, that's because someone's gone in and removed the actuator head, which is obviously not ideal. But it can be other things. It could be corrosion. It could be anything that's just preventing the valve from actually closing, even though it should be closed. But if you got the data and you can access it remotely, you can quickly identify the problem and send someone there to put it right. Another thing we come across quite often is this problem. Again, we can see at the bulk meter in the plant room that we're getting an excessive return temperature. If we got access to the meter data, we can see exactly where it's stemming from. But here it's especially important that we get access to the tertiary side, because in this scenario, it's the tertiary heating system that is unbalanced. So it's a radiator system or an unflow heating system returning an excessive temperature to the HAU. And obviously this is what it's using to cool down against, and it can't because the temperatures are too high. So it's really important to have bulk meter access, HAU meter access, but also access to see what is happening within the apartment as well, to be able to properly analyze what might have gone wrong. Then there's this scenario where all the HAUs are working exactly as they should, but there's a bypass elsewhere in the system. This happens an awful lot. They're left open, people have forgotten to commission any bypass valves, and you just get the really high return temperatures coming back. But the important thing here really is to have the remote accessibility so that you can remotely dial in and see what is going on, so you don't have to actually run around physically on site to try to find the issue. Moving on to the visa test. So the visa test was introduced in 2016, really warmly welcomed by the industry, and it's speeded up R&D efforts, the R&D efforts of most HU manufacturers in the UK. So it's been really, really fantastic. The test will replicate typical UK operating conditions, and the key outcome is the VWARD figure. The test results will show how these HAUs are performing in perfect laboratory conditions, where one example would be, sorry, at least it's one problem, I should have said. It shows what these HAUs how they will perform under perfect laboratory conditions. One example here, which is what I mentioned earlier, if the radiator system has not been commissioned and the radiators are returning a higher return temperature, the HAUs will not be able to perform as per this test. And that is because the secondary return temperature in the test is fixed. There's a lot of other things that will affect the performance. So these test results need to be regarded as best case scenario figures. To be able to ensure that this performance is sustained over time, a monitoring system needs to be in place. It's really, really important, because we all want to see units performing really well in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, in 15 years' time, the units will still need to perform. And there's so many variables that could happen and so many reasons the unit will not perform as per test conditions, that the only way of making sure they do is to continuously monitor them. So this is where performance monitoring software solutions really come into place. There's a lot of platforms available on the market, and we obviously offer our own as well. So these platforms should let you monitor the performance over time, but they should also send you alerts when anything is out of the ordinary. For example, if you get an unexpected bypass, if the heat losses are excessive, or if you've lost pressure, if a heat meter is disconnected, and anything that might affect performance, it needs to be put to the operator's attention as soon as possible so that it can be put right. There's a couple of examples of what our platform looks like, but really it really helps with acceptance testing, continuous commissioning, planned maintenance, and I've said this a few times now, but it also gives you access to the tertiary system, so you can see what is happening there. You can change the set points remotely off the secondary side, change the heating set point remotely, the hot water set point remotely, pump speed remotely, and it gives you so many tools to actually analyze what is going on with your network that are absolutely crucial. Just going to finish with this little overview. This is one project where we have supplied 797 HIUs. It was in 2014 these were installed, so they've been installed for a while. We did an analysis, so this is one moment in time really, and we could see at this time the aggregate, not average, so in this VWAT and VWAFT, the ASOS is aggregate, so we have calculated the aggregate return temperatures at that moment in time from all the HIUs. So in this before table, we could see that the flow temperature to all HIUs was at 66 degrees. The return temperature was at 43.6 degrees. So that was not amazing. But then when we look at it in a little bit more detail, we could see that the units that were in hot water mode were returning a return temperature of 25.9 degrees, which might sound a little bit high, but that is mainly due to the cold water coming in was at 20. So this again shows you that the laboratory test conditions are not always a true reflection of what is actually happening out there. We don't get 10 degrees coming into the units a lot of the time at all. So here we got 20 degrees coming into the unit. We're returning a 25.9 degree return temperature from the units in hot water mode. The units in heating mode at that time were returning 37.8 degrees back to the network, and the units in keep warm mode were returning 38 degrees back to the network. But out of these 797 units installed, 4 of them were bypassing, and we could see that they were bypassing because we could see that the valves were in a 0 position, so they were meant to be closed, but we could also see that there was a flow rate going through them. So 4 units out of 797 had a flow rate of almost 5,000 litres per hour. So that is 26% of the total flow rate through the system was returned at 67 degrees, so hardly any delta T at all, which obviously brought up the aggregate return temperature. So just as an example, once these units have stopped bypassing, the combined flow rate drops down to 14,000 litres per hour, and the aggregate return temperature drops from 43 down to 35 degrees. So this is to highlight that you might have an amazing heat network, and there is so much going right with them. But if you only have 4 units that are not behaving as they should, that could mess up all of your figures. So this is, again, really important that you pick up on this as quickly as possible, so they can be put right as quickly as possible, so you don't end up in a situation where these 4 units are bypassing for 2 or 3 months just because no one is really aware of this happening. So that is what I wanted to cover. But as Evinox, most of you might think of us as a heat interface unit manufacturer only. But we are really, really passionate on the heat networks actually performing after we have delivered our product. So we like to get involved at an early stage and help advise on the hot water loads, heating loads, pipe sizing, diversity calculations. We then move on to the product range. We've got quite a broad product range, and that is to ensure that we are selecting the right plates for the specific project. So we don't take a one-size-fits-all approach, because then we will end up with a lot of oversized units with constant laminar flow going through the plates. So we do always make sure that the product we supply to the project has been sized specifically for the project they're going into. We've got our own factory, so we're fully in control of our production and logistics. We've got the two-way communication so that we can actually offer the analysis of the network. And then we also offer metering and billing services. Still open access, anyone can do metering and billing on our product, but we do offer that as an extra service.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks very much indeed, Helen. Much appreciated for the presentation. If I could invite you to leave the stage and Matthew Blackmore from Armstrong to join us. Matthew's will be talking about optimising district heating pump strategy. And could I just raise, before Matthew starts, there's still a large number of people attending this event, which is great to see you. Would really appreciate some questions for the speakers. If you'd like to put some questions in the question section, I'd really appreciate that to stimulate the discussion after this last speaker. So over to Matthew to present on his topic.
Thanks, Simon. Can you hear me? I will assume that you can hear me. Right. So,
sorry, Matthew, I said yes as I was dashing off the stage.
That's not a problem. To make sure that I was being heard.
No worries.
No worries. Cheers. Okay, so for those of you who don't know us, Armstrong have been designing and manufacturing hydraulic pumps, booster sets, pressurization units and heat exchangers globally since 1934. Which makes fluid flow and heat transfer very much the core of our business. We operate a 6,000 square metre off-site manufacturing facility where we engineer complete HVAC systems for district energy and other HVAC applications. And this can range from anything from an energy centre down to a substation and, of course, hydraulic pump modules. We also design a number of control and optimisation solutions which take our product from just a device up to a system. These draw on the experience and understanding of the relationship between fluid flow and heat transfer, which makes district energy fit very well for us as a business on how we design and approach our system solutions. So today I wanted to try and keep the theme of the presentation close to those that are present in the CP1 design guide. Armstrong tried to make every effort to work with guidance that exists for every application that we design and select our products for. With this in mind, I'll give my thoughts and insights to our guidance on deploying pump systems that give correctly sized plant and incorporate effective variable flow control principles. I've also just highlighted that measuring performance at the bottom of the slide, which I'll just try and demonstrate how, if we can connect device level equipment, can really support over the life cycle of a network's development. So what does the design guide prompt us to do for the hydraulic pump system? It asks us to consider multiple pumps in parallel, so selecting a larger number of pumps, so 3 at 50% duty, 4 at 33%. We still maintain the redundancy, but it does open the door to more efficient operation over the whole profile. It asks us to consider the addition of low flow pumps. We refer to this at Armstrong as a jockey pump, and this mitigates the poor turn down and controls at low levels. So correct selection and system integration, however, generally at this level is poorly executed. There is a lack of understanding on how to actually make that changeover actually happen. Control logic. CP1 recommends enlisting a pump manufacturer's recommendations, something that unfortunately still doesn't really happen very often today. And then ongoing checks and energy monitoring. Very often, I think someone alluded to it earlier, refers to heat meters. However, I want to try and show what you can do to benefit from connecting devices, as I said previously, and what we can do from the pump end. So think of the pump almost as a flow meter that's continually data logging for those system insights. And then generally, as a theme of the presentation, which will hopefully come out by the end of it, is I want you to try and think flexible, think adaptable, and think pump systems as opposed to just a pump as a device. If we think about a booster set, like what is just pictured on the screen here, it's a standalone product, or we could refer to that as a pump system. It comprises pumps, pipework, controls, and power. When we size this, or when we're asked to size it, very often we're just given a mass flow rate and a head. And the number of the pumps that we actually put forward is generally left to the pump manufacturer to derive. The BMS end of this has no authority over pump sequencing or staging. It's an interface panel. So when we consider distribution pumps, why don't we approach it in this way? And that's really just a question to ponder. So district heating has a very unique and dynamic load profile over time. And this does present designers and consultants with challenges to satisfy CapEx, OpEx, whilst trying to maximise on system efficiencies. This has bit spoken about in bit part quite a few times over the course of this morning. So if we take a moment to understand the application, the inherent challenges, that gives us then an opportunity to apply a solution. So we need to appreciate more so what the load profile looks like set up against the network build out, because it's the actual build out of the network that opens the door for optimal operation. The day-to-day load profile, like we show on the left-hand side of the screen, it might not change much over the course of time, but how an actual network builds out is what does change. So what I'm trying to demonstrate is that for, say, an existing network, it will have perhaps a load condition that's lower in 2015 to what we see today and what we're going to see next year or over the course of the coming years. So in real terms, what that means in 2015, these are just random figures plucked from the air, we might need 10 litres a second as a minimum flow point. Today, in 2022, that might be 22 litres a second. Next year, or beyond next year, that might be somewhere near 30 litres a second. So the correct sizing of plant and equipment becomes really important at day one to cover that range of and the spectrum over time. So now I'm still asked daily to select pumps from a schedule that are at full load duty, but should we be selecting plant for efficiency at full load? I would say no. And a secondary point to this is should we be doing this all from day one? Absolutely not. And this is what I feel is needing some reshaping. So to try and demonstrate this over the coming slides, I'm just going to run through an example that's applicable to both a planned and an existing network, but with very different takeaways. Before I do that, I just want to throw out some very rough rules of thumb. Up to around 80 litres a second in a system, you can still generally design that around a duty standby arrangement and get relatively good levels of efficiency across the spectrum. Anything between 80 litres and 300 litres, generally speaking, 3 pumps in a duty standby will give a good range of efficiency. And then finally, anything over that, so very large systems, 300 litres and above, we would then look to consider 4 and 5 pump configurations, with each pump then sized at the 33 or 25% of flow. That being said, we always like to consider adding jockey pumps in each case or each one of those bands where you're starting to reach the upper limits, because then you can then maximize your efficiencies at the lower level. So back to this particular example. This is a live project and currently installed is a 2-pump set duty standby. And I was asked for a selection based on a direct replacement, but with a little bit more capacity. So I asked the question, well, how much more do you need? And the answer that I got was quite candid in so much as, well, we're not sure. We're going to add some more buildings over the next couple of years. So we just need a bit more. Now, that's a challenge in itself. So we'll come back to readdress that over the course of time. But now let's just focus firstly on the benefits that we can actually just make. If that wasn't the case, and we are just making a like-for-like replacement with a slightly different approach. So if you can just note on this slide, we've got 2 37 kilowatt pumps selected at duty standby. That gives a total install capacity of 74 kilowatts. So at 100% design duty, we see 85% efficiency. At half and quarter, that drops down to 78 and 69. If we then select 3 pumps in duty standby, we then see the total kilowatt installed power is now reduced to 66 kilowatts. So we've made a saving of power installation size. which has a knock-on effect of cost in terms of the infrastructure that goes with that in say a new network. So whilst we do actually lose a negative 1.6% of efficiency at design duty, what we actually gain is over 5% at half and quarter loads. Now, somebody alluded to earlier, we oversize equipment terribly. We very, very rarely operate at design duty. Most of our time is spent at part load. We accept that we live in a part load environment, a part load world, but we still select plant and size plant based on the worst case scenario. So if you know this is a fixed network load, in this instance it is, we can make genuine savings for existing networks just by employing a slightly different approach that's supported by CP1. So if we then look at or think of this through the eyes of a planned network, on paper, what we see here on the screen is great. However, if we think back to the earlier slide of the load build out and the load profiles, this is the same conundrum. If we install this at day one, we're going to have really poor efficiency, limited turndown, and equally lots of idle equipment that just won't need to operate. So with the best will in the world, we can follow design guides, but they don't always account for everyday operation situations that incur. And that's something that's obviously been spoken to quite a few times during the course of this session. So let's address the challenge. Let's move the goalposts a little bit. Let's design for every day, not just design day. If we do that and we think about things in that mentality, we can solve a lot of these issues. Look at the drawing on the screen for reference. Pipework, controls, infrastructure, they're all in place for what will be deemed as design day. But then we have a phased introduction of pumps that are brought into the network as that load is dictating. So we can then maintain efficiencies throughout the entire build-out program. This can be predefined. It's demonstrated on the drawing. We can make a series of pump selections based on scenarios, but equally that can be changed at any given time. So from day one, day two, anything up to design day, we can really make vast savings. So what you get is an incumbent pump strategy for the entire life of the network, a standard and repeatable design that you can approach and use on multiple projects, and an off-the-shelf controls interface that's scalable and adaptable. This gives the mechanism to both correctly size plant, future-proof the approach, and this is essentially what Armstrong looked to do in the way that we speak to people to try and impart our guidance in incorporating CP1. So we need to think flexible, think adaptable, and think pump system. Let's not just treat it as a device. Let's think of it like the booster that I picked up on earlier and go for something slightly different that's not changing the goalpost, it's just moving them slightly. At this point, I just also point out we apply this exact same philosophy when we manufacture energy centres. So it's not a limitation at this end. We can actually demonstrate the same philosophy in a slightly different way on how we apply that to an energy centre. So I'd be happy to speak to anybody that's interested in seeing that as a philosophy after this particular presentation. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the controls element and what makes this more of a systemised product as opposed to just a mechanical skid. Armstrong's pump controller offers out of the box a predetermined DesOps, full sequence of operation, points lists, power architecture that interfaces to the wider BMS. Now, again, relating this back to CP1, it actually asks us to try and come up with a predetermined DesOps. This gives you that solution. We're able to take multiple zone differential pressure feedback for up to 16 zones so that we're always satisfying the index leg. We can also take minimum flow bypasses, control back to it and control that minimum flow bypass condition, and then integrate that with a jockey pump. So we mentioned that how poorly that is executed. This is an out-of-the-box solution. We know how to select the crossover points for a jockey pump, and then we can then control that integration, phasing in and phasing out in the actual system. Delta T and return temperature controls all on board. So it addresses some of the issues that people have raised this morning. So it does this from a pump level perspective. And this tries to address and solve many of the challenges presented through CP1 when we consider pump control and strategy. And then just to pick up again on something that was said earlier, BMS is a high-level management system. They're not experts in every item of plant and their effective operation. We're talking about a pump here. We're the pump manufacturer. We've designed the hydraulics. We know how that pump needs to operate or when it should be operating. So let the experts in their own device and their own field have autonomy over what we do. So just a really quick slide here. This is normally an animation, but unfortunately it's not going to carry through today. But the slide shows two different methods. On the top, we've got Armstrong's approach to best efficiency staging, as opposed to speed-based staging on the bottom. So if we're staging pumps on and off on efficiency rather than on just speed, what you gain is a positive rather than a negative energy impact. Delayed staging in the traditional approach, where efficiency has already fallen off before you bring your next stage on, is where you lose that efficiency. So at 2 and 3 pumps, so at 50, 60, 70% of load, when someone might be operating 3 pumps, but we might be operating 2 pumps, or vice versa, use our knowledge of our product to stage those pumps in the right way for the system. And then just to overlay that to a typical operating profile, we see that the bulk of the operating hours are spent between 25 and 65% of capacity. So the staging in this area gives us that huge saving potential. The correct staging of pumps on the basis of efficiency rather than the basis of pump speed can save over 30% in energy costs. And that's a dramatic saving in lost energy costs. So all of Armstrong's pumps and solutions are Wi-Fi enabled. We transmit and operate all operational data to the cloud through either an API or directly to the BMS or direct to our own cloud-based platform. The platform here shown on the screen collects the data and correlates it and gives the performance management capability. So we talked about load profiles at length already. This can actually give you the foresight of that. And this isn't just micro data. This is over the course of the whole time that this pump's installed. This can be 1, 2, 3 years. You can narrow it down to a day. So you can get your load profile across an average day, or you can have your aggregated data across the year. In addition to that, a really good feature to note, every pump's fitted with a vibration sensor, and we collect vibration analysis. All rotating equipment have failure points. Each one will have its own vibration signature. So now we can start to actually predict the failure by seeing the signatures becoming apparent. This maximizes uptime, and it can carry out corrective action before it becomes a problem. We don't need more redundancy that's already in an oversized system. We just need to understand, monitor what's actually happening. And this is the benefit of connecting up smart devices. And so finally, last couple of slides, I won't be a moment. Everything that we've discussed today is brought together by employing an intelligent fluid management system. Armstrong referred to this as an IFMS. It's a systemized product that empowers standard, repeatable, modular approach. You have standard controls, efficient operation, cloud connected for continued performance improvements. In short, it's a complete pump system. And then last but not least, my closing thoughts around the key themes of CP1 that have been discussed today at length. Discuss load profiles, not just a duty. Discuss an approach to network phasing. Select plant, not just pumps, this is all plant, for best efficiency at part load, not just for efficiency at full load. And let's try to talk about design for every day and not just design day. Thanks.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks very much indeed. That's very helpful, Matthew. So, Tom, if you don't mind taking down Matthew's presentation, I'd just like to invite Ria, Adam, and Helen to join us back on the screen. I'm checking out the questions, although we've still got quite a large number of people in the room. We seem to be fairly silent with questions. So I will ask a question. The key takeaways from all of the presentations this morning are monitoring, gathering data, sizing correctly, not just for peaks, embracing innovations, following guidance, reducing pipe length, temperature, and increasing insulation. If I went round the four of you as sort of closing comments, which one of those, or do you think something else? What do you think? If people take away nothing more from this morning but one key point, what do you think that key point is that they should take away? Shall we start with Matthew, whose brain is most probably still fertile from his last presentation? So Matthew, the one key point, do you think?
It'd be two, but it's a combination of both. It's designed for every day and not just design day. And to actually do that is via logging data and using data to benefit the approach to adapt systems over time. Don't just design for design day.
Cool, excellent. Adam, any thoughts of a final key takeaway you think that people should have?
I would agree with Matthew. I think designing correctly, from the outset is just so important. And then if we don't do this, then anything else is hard to sort of make up the difference. And I think maybe another one I'd put in is innovation. Embracing innovation, not just in products, but in concepts, different ways of doing things. Maybe breaking away from the norm, what we're used to, and looking at how could we do this differently. Yeah.
No, absolutely. No, thanks very much. Maria, any final takeaway thought, the key thing that you think people should take away?
Design is important, but like we say in Finland, where the networks are much older, that they do change, and it's necessary that also the efficiency approach changes over time. And I would say it's important to look at the system as a whole, not just partly optimize certain part of certain product. You need to cover everything, starting from the power plant finally to the network and the customer, and use new tools for that.
Brilliant, excellent. And finally, Helen, final key thought?
Without data, you're just another person with an opinion. So it's really important to keep collecting data from all the networks out there, as much data as we can, and then turn it into something useful.
Brilliant. No, thanks very much. Some really good common themes there for the speakers. So I'd like to thank the 4 speakers who are currently on the stage and all of the other speakers today. I'd like to particularly thank all the delegates for joining. And we'll now bring the conference to a close. So thanks very much. And Tom, over to you to close the conference.
Thanks, Simon.
Thanks very much.